Tonight we enter a temple where one unopened doorway has become more powerful than any treasure revealed beside it. In July 2011, a committee appointed under the authority of India's Supreme Court began examining the underground chambers of the Padmanabhaswamy Temple. The shrine stands in Thiruvananthapuram, near India's southwestern coast, where monsoon clouds gather over red-tiled roofs and coconut palms. Court officials, temple representatives, archaeologists, and security personnel approached the work with unusual caution. They were not entering an abandoned ruin, they were entering a living place of worship, where every corridor remained bound to ritual, memory, and fear. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. You may also share your location and local time in the comments. There is something quietly fitting about listeners across the world gathering beside the same ancient threshold. The morning air feels heavy with rain as you approach the temple complex. Moisture clings to the stone, darkening every carved surface along the outer walls. Sandals move softly across the ground, while distant bells mark the changing rhythm of worship somewhere nearby. Oil burns inside shallow brass lamps. Its scent mixes with incense, wet earth, flowers, and the faint mineral smell of old masonry. Nothing here feels abandoned. Pilgrims continue their prayers while the legal inspection unfolds beyond ordinary sight. Priests move through familiar routines, carrying lamps, vessels, and garlands into shadowed halls. Guards remain near entrances that once required little modern protection. Officials carry lists, measuring tools, cameras, and documents approved by the court. Each object belongs to a different world. One world trusts ritual continuity, the other trusts written procedure. You stand between them. The case that brings the committee here begins with concerns over the management and protection of the temple's property. For generations, the shrine has remained closely connected to the former royal family of Travancore. The rulers once governed this region, but they claimed to do so as servants of the temple deity. Their wealth, authority, and political identity became tied to sacred guardianship. By 2011, questions had grown louder. Who should protect the temple's treasures? Who should record them? Could sacred wealth remain beyond public accounting simply because tradition demanded words? The Supreme Court's involvement transforms those questions into action. Several chambers beneath the temple are identified for inspection. They receive simple alphabetical labels, almost absurdly ordinary names for spaces surrounded by centuries of rumour. The letters appear in legal records, inventories, and official discussions. Yet beneath the clean language of administration lies something far less orderly. There is darkness below the stone floors. The first opened chambers reveal objects that seem to belong to several ages at once. Gold coins lie beside ornaments, ritual vessels, chains, statues, precious stones, and ceremonial objects. Some items appear carefully stored, others rest in containers weakened by time. Wealth has accumulated through royal donations, merchant offerings, diplomatic gifts, and private acts of devotion. Records confirm that major South Indian temples often served purposes beyond worship. They could become landholders, employers, lenders, storehouses, and political institutions. Modern scholarship from universities such as Oxford and Yale treats temple wealth as a layered record of society. A coin is not merely a coin. It can mark a trade route, a ruler's ambition, a family's gratitude, or a promise made during illness. Yet abundance changes the atmosphere. As each chamber is examined, the outside world begins imagining impossible quantities of gold. Newspapers publish estimates that rise with every report. Crowds gather beyond temple boundaries, security increases, metal detectors, armed guards, and surveillance measures enter a setting shaped by older forms of protection. The treasure is becoming visible. One chamber remains different. It is known in official discussion as Vault B, although the name makes it sound like an ordinary storage room. Those who speak about it describe several barriers rather than one simple door. There are references to an outer entrance, an inner enclosure, metalwork, wooden structures, and stone. Accounts differ, and the differences only deepen the mystery. The committee approaches the chamber but does not complete its opening. Religious representatives object. They argue that the space carries a distinct sacred character and cannot be treated like the other rooms. Some warn that opening it without proper ritual authority could disturb forces associated with the temple. Others speak more practically, mentioning structural danger, trapped air, water, or unknown conditions underground. The legal process pauses at the edge of belief. Your mind drifts toward the doorway itself. You picture officials standing beneath low ceilings, their voices softened. By thick walls, a metal latch feels cold beneath a gloved hand. Dust rests in corners untouched by ordinary movement. Every sound becomes strangely enlarged. A key turns, wood shifts, someone steps back. Then silence returns. A popular fringe legend claims that the chamber is protected by a mystical seal linked to serpent guardians. Some versions insist that only a perfectly trained priest could open it through sacred sound. Other versions warn that any forced entry would release disaster across the region. These tales are not established history, yet they reveal something important. People do not fear doors without reason. Sometimes the reason is religious, sometimes it is political. Sometimes the door protects nothing more dangerous than an argument no one knows how to settle. Legal historians and scholars of religion continue debating where sacred autonomy should end when public accountability begins. Researchers at institutions such as Stanford and the University of Chicago have examined similar conflicts between heritage law and living religious practice. A temple can be an architectural monument, a treasury, a legal trust, and a home of worship. Each identity creates different obligations. The court sees responsibility. The priests see continuity. The public sees hidden wealth. The doorway holds all three. You move closer in imagination, though no official permission allows that final step. The carvings around the threshold seem older beneath the weak electric light. Their forms become difficult to read. A curved shape might be a serpent, a decorative border, or something repaired during a later century. The surface carries scratches, stains, and layers of touch. Nothing explains itself completely. Outside, the rain strengthens against the temple roofs. Water travels through carved channels and falls into stone courtyards. The city continues moving beyond the walls, with traffic, market noise, telephone calls, and restless speculation. Inside, the chamber remains unchanged. The committee withdraws without forcing the final barrier. This restraint disappoints those expecting a dramatic revelation, yet the refusal to open the doorway becomes the most important event of the entire inspection. Open chambers can be measured, photographed, and listed. Their contents gradually become facts. A closed chamber behaves differently. It gathers every unanswered question. Perhaps the vault contains more gold than all the others. Perhaps it holds ceremonial objects never intended for ordinary sight. It may conceal damaged foundations, flooded passages, empty rooms, or forgotten repairs. It is possible that the most unsettling answer would be the simplest one. Perhaps there is nothing extraordinary inside. Still, the doorway remains closed, and that changes how you understand it. The object behind the door matters less than the boundary itself. Someone once decided that this place should remain separate. Later generations inherited that decision without fully understanding its origin. Now judges, priests, historians, and citizens stand around the same inherited silence. The lamps burn lower as evening gathers over Thiruvananthapuram. The scent of wax smoke settles into the corridors. Footsteps fade behind carved pillars. Beneath the temple, sealed behind layered barriers, the unopened chamber waits without explanation. And you begin to wonder whether the court has discovered treasure, or something far more difficult to possess. A reason not to enter. The city awakens beneath a sky the colour of tarnished silver, while warm rain settles over tiled roofs and narrow lanes. You move through Thiruvananthapuram at an hour when shopkeepers lift wooden shutters and temple bells cross the damp morning air. Water gathers along stone edges, carrying flower petals, ash, and tiny leaves toward drains hidden beneath the street. The monsoon changes every surface. Granite darkens until it appears almost black. Brass lamps shine more brightly against the clouded daylight. White garments cling lightly to ankles as worshippers cross open courtyards with careful, practiced steps. Beyond the temple walls, vendors arrange jasmine, coconuts, bananas, sandwood paste, and small packets of vermilion powder. The city's name is usually understood as the sacred city of the divine reclining figure, Horus. That meaning places the temple not merely inside the city, but at its spiritual centre. Streets, royal buildings, markets, tanks, and ceremonial routes developed around this sacred focus over many generations. You feel that arrangement while walking. The great temple gateway rises above surrounding roofs, tiered with sculpted figures and pale surfaces softened by rain. Its height draws the eye upward, yet the city's true gravity seems to pull downward. Beneath the gateway lie courtyards, corridors, foundations, storage rooms, wells, and chambers whose exact history remains difficult to reconstruct. Thiruvananthapuram belongs to the humid southwestern edge of the Indian peninsula. The Arabian Sea lies nearby, breathing salt into the air and feeding clouds that break against the land. Coconut groves once spread across much of the surrounding region, broken by ponds, laterite paths, palace compounds, and cultivated gardens. This landscape shaped daily life. Rain determined travel, planting and bums, repairs, storage, and ritual movement. Oil had to remain dry, grain required protection from mould, metal needed cleaning, wooden beams demanded constant attention in a climate where moisture quietly enters everything. Even stone, which pretends to resist time, gathers moss in shaded corners. Temple servants begin their duties long before many residents wake. Lamps are trimmed, floors are washed, flowers are sorted, vessels are polished, and offerings are prepared according to established sequences. These actions create a rhythm more durable than any single ruler. The routine is exact. A bell sounds, and a door opens. A lamp passes through a corridor. Water is carried in a bronze vessel, while incense smoke curls beneath a carved ceiling. Priests move through spaces whose meanings are learned through repetition, not through maps. Records from the South Indian kingdoms confirm that major temples supported large communities of workers, musicians, accountants, cooks, guards, gardeners and nets, artisans, scribes, and ritual specialists could all depend upon the institution. The temple was therefore both sacred center and working household. Although calling it a household rather understates the amount of paperwork involved. Historians at Oxford and Yale have examined how temples shaped regional economies through land holding, employment, and redistribution. Their research helps explain why precious objects entered temple stores from many directions. Wealth arrived through devotion, taxation, diplomacy, trade, inheritance, and royal ceremony. Gold did not simply appear. A merchant might offer coins after surviving a dangerous voyage. A ruler could present ornaments following a military success or political alliance. A family might dedicate jewellery in gratitude for recovery from illness. Each offering carried a private stee, even when later records preserved only weight, material, and estimated value. The city absorbed these stories. You pass a water tank beside the temple, its broad surface disturbed by rain. Steps descend in measured lines toward green water, reflecting fragments of the gateway whenever the clouds brighten. Tanks like this supported bathing, ritual purification, water storage, and the visual drama of sacred architecture. Children once learned the safest steps by memory. Elderly worshippers move slowly along the edges, gripping stone worn smooth by countless hands. During festivals, lamps multiplied across nearby surfaces until water and flame appeared to share the same trembling body. The royal city also developed close to the shrine. The rulers of Travancore maintained palaces and administrative buildings within the sacred landscape. Their presence changed the character of surrounding streets, bringing guards, petitioners, messengers, craftsmen, and officials into the temple's orbit. Power wore ceremonial clothing here. A royal procession did not merely travel from one building to another. It passed through a city arranged to display submission, hierarchy, and divine protection. Umbrellas, drums, lamps, elephants, and armed escorts turned movement into political language. Yet ordinary life continued around such spectacles. Fish sellers argued over prices, carpenters repaired shutters, rain leaked through roofs at exactly the wrong moment, as rain usually prefers. Dogs slept beneath raised platforms, and crows watched offerings with the patient concentration of experienced thieves. A curious local tale claims that certain underground passages once connected sacred buildings, palaces, water sources, and distant points beyond the city. Some versions extend these imagined tunnels toward the sea. No reliable survey confirms such an enormous network, but the story survives because old cities often hide drains, foundations, cellars, and blocked corridors beneath later construction. The rumour grows naturally from the ground itself. You notice how rarely the city offers a clear boundary between visible and concealed space. A bright courtyard may rest above sealed masonry. A palace garden may cover older walls. A modern street can follow a ceremonial route established centuries earlier. Archaeologists from institutions such as the University of Pennsylvania have shown how living cities preserve ancient layers unevenly. Continuous occupation protects some traditions while destroying other evidence. Walls are repaired, stones are reused, and written records disappear during political change or tropical decay. This creates an open scholarly debate. Some historians believe the urban plan around the temple developed gradually from an early sacred settlement. Others argue that royal planning later imposed greater order upon older paths, markets, and residential zones. The evidence remains incomplete because excavation within an active religious centre is both difficult and sensitive. The city does not surrender its history easily. Even names change across documents and languages. Rulers rename places, officials standardise spellings, and local speech preserves older forms. Maps suggest permanence, but the lived city remains fluid, shaped by memory, weather, and use. As afternoon deepens, the rain becomes finer. It hangs in the air rather than falling, settling on skin like cool breath. Lamp smoke drifts from an entrance, carrying the scent of clarified butter, flowers, and scorched cotton wicks. You hear sandals squeak against wet stone. A drumbeat travels from within the temple complex. It is low, measured, and almost swallowed by the rain. The sound passes through pillars, courtyard, and walls before reaching the street as a softened pulse. Around you, gold appears only in fragments. It glints along a lamp's rim, a necklace, a ceremonial vessel, or painted decoration near a doorway. Yet the city's association with wealth feels larger than visible ornament. Its riches are buried within custom. A flower seller knows which garland suits each offering. A priest remembers the order of words and gestures. A metal worker understands how to restore a damaged lamp without changing its sacred character. An elderly resident recalls a procession route that younger people know only as a crowded road. Such knowledge cannot be weighed. The temple stands within this living network, surrounded by rain, commerce, devotion, and inherited duty. Its concealed chambers belong to the same city that rises above them, not to some separate world of legend. Night approaches without urgency. Shop lights flicker beneath awnings. Water continues along gutters. The gateway loses its pale daytime colour and becomes a layered silhouette against the clouded skeeks. Inside the courtyards, lamps remain steady while the city darkens around them. Beneath those lights, stone foundations hold the accumulated pressure of centuries. Above them, worship continues with patient regularity. And throughout Thiruvananthapuram, rain keeps falling, as though the city itself is guarding what the earth has chosen not to reveal. The stone beneath your feet does not belong to a single age. Each corridor carries traces of rebuilding, repair, devotion, and quiet replacement. A pillar may seem ancient, yet its surface could have been reshaped during a later restoration. A doorway may preserve an older alignment while wearing newer carvings. The sanctuary has changed without announcing every change. You enter a place where history survives in fragments rather than in one complete account. Copper plates, royal orders, temple records, fact traditions, and architectural clues offer pieces of a long story. They do not always agree, and many begin only after the shrine had already become important. This uncertainty gives the temple its deepest age. Tradition connects the sanctuary with remote sacred time, far beyond the reach of surviving documents. Local accounts describe holy figures discovering or restoring worship at the site. Some stories place the beginning so early that ordinary chronology loses its meaning. The temple becomes less a building founded on a date and more a presence gradually recognized. Historians must work differently. They examine inscriptions, construction methods, artistic styles, land grants, and references preserved in neighbouring regions. Records confirm that the shrine existed as a significant institution during the medieval period. Yet those records do not reveal the first moment of worship. The beginning remains hidden. You study the walls and notice that the architecture does not speak with one voice. Certain features reflect the building traditions of Kerala, especially the practical use of sloping roofs against heavy rainfall. Other elements display influences associated with the great temple complexes farther east in southern India. Wood, stone, plaster, and metal meet in careful layers. These materials age at different speeds. Timber can be replaced without changing the sacred purpose of a hall. Roof tiles can be renewed repeatedly, while the foundations beneath them remain much older. This makes dating difficult. A temple is not a buried ruin left untouched after abandonment. It is repaired because people continue to use it. Damaged beams are removed, walls receive new coatings, lamps stain ceilings, floors wear down beneath generations of bare feet. Continuity preserves the institution while confusing the evidence. Researchers connected with universities such as Oxford and the University of Chicago have studied this problem across South Asian sacred sites. Their work shows that living temples often contain several historical periods within one visible structure. The newest surface may conceal the oldest ritual boundary. You pause beside a carved column and run your eyes along its patterns. The figures seem precise, but small differences emerge. One band appears more restrained, another carries richer ornament. A repaired edge interrupts the rhythm like a missing line in a poem. Someone worked here at another time. Royal patronage expanded the complex across generations. Rulers repaired walls, commissioned gateways, endowed ceremonies, and ordered new halls. Each act strengthened the shrine while also reshaping its physical form. Political ambition and religious devotion often arrived together, politely pretending not to notice one another. A king could restore a temple to honour the divine. He could also display legitimacy, wealth, and control. These motives did not need to conflict. Sacred architecture allowed earthly authority to present itself as humble service. The stone remembers both purposes. Written records from later centuries describe renovations substantial enough to transform the appearance of the complex. Fires, weather, neglect, warfare, and changing royal priorities may all have affected earlier structures. Tropical conditions further reduced the survival of fragile manuscripts and wooden elements. Palm leaf documents required recopying. Every copy created an opportunity for loss, correction, addition, or reinterpretation. A scribe might preserve an old tradition faithfully, another might simplify a confusing passage. A damaged leaf could remove a name, a place, or an entire generation from the surviving account. You can almost hear the scratching of the stylus. In a dim room, a record keeper bends over the narrow leaves, pressing letters into their surface. Oil light trembles beside his hand. Outside, insects gather near the flame, and a night bird calls beyond the wall. He records a donation, a boundary, or a royal command. He does not know which words will survive. One unusual tale claims that the original sacred image was so immense that worshippers viewed it through separate doorways. The form could not be taken in from one position. The head, body, and feet appeared through distinct openings, forcing the visitor to experience the divine in parts. The idea is strangely fitting. The temple's history must also be viewed through separate openings. One doorway reveals architecture, Another reveals royal administration. A third reveals ritual memory. None provides the complete figure. Scholars continued debating whether the oldest sanctuary began as a modest regional inn or as part of a wider network of early sacred centres. Some emphasise literary traditions that suggest great antiquity. Others prefer the firmer ground of inscriptions and datable artistic features. Neither position fully settles the question. Literary memory can preserve ancient truth while changing its details. Archaeology can establish phases of construction while missing rituals performed in perishable buildings. A wooden shrine may vanish almost completely, leaving later stonework to receive the credit for an older sacred place. Perhaps the earliest temple will look nothing like the present one. Your mind drifts toward a small compound beneath dense trees. The roof is low and dark from rain. Lamps burn near a simple inner chamber. Paths form through repeated footsteps rather than planned courtyards. Offerings arrive in clay vessels, woven baskets, and folded leaves. No monumental gateway dominates the sky. Then centuries pass. Patrons add walls. Craftsmen carve pillars. Priests expand ceremonies. Royal officials begin recording lands, payment, and privileges. What began as a local sacred place becomes an institution with regional influence. This is possible. It is also possible that the site gained importance through several separate moments of renewal. A shrine may decline, recover, and later claim an unbroken history. Communities often remember continuity more clearly than interruption because continuity provides stabilities. The past becomes smoother in retelling. Prestigious research institutions such as Yale have examined how sacred traditions create historical identity through selective memory. This does not mean the traditions are false. It means they preserve meaning differently from court records or archaeological reports. A legend asks why a place matters. An inscription asks who donated land. A wall asks who rebuilt it. You stand where these questions overlap. The sanctuary offers no foundation stone bearing a simple founding year. No surviving document introduces the first priest, the first image, or the first gathering of worshippers. The earliest certainty arrives late, already surrounded by established custom. That absence feels deliberate, although it is probably not. Old institutions rarely begin with witnesses preparing evidence for distant historians. They begin through repeated acts. Someone lights a lamp, someone returns the next day. A family brings an offering. A ruler grants protection. A pathway becomes permanent. Then memory gathers around the place. The temple's age therefore lies partly in what can be measured and partly in what cannot. Stonework provides sequences. Records provide names. Rituals provide continuity. Legends provide emotional depth. None can stand alone. As evening settles into the inner halls, shadows collect above the beams. The architecture seems to withdraw from easy inspection. Details visible in daylight become uncertain shapes, and repaired surfaces blend again with older stone. You begin to understand why the sanctuary resists a single beginning. It has been created repeatedly by those who worshipped, repaired, recorded, and imagined it. Long before any surviving document, someone stood here and believed the place was sacred. Their name is Goni, their lamp is not. The palace wakes under a pale morning sky, while servants carry lamps through long wooden corridors. You hear the soft scrape of bare feet and the measured call of distant birds. Outside, rainwater drips from carved eaves into courtyards filled with damp stone and fallen blossoms. A ruler prepares to surrender a kingdom. Marthandavarma has spent years strengthening Travancore through warfare, diplomacy, taxation, and relentless administrative reform. He has defeated rival nobles, absorbed neighbouring territories, and challenged foreign commercial power along the coast. His victories have created a state larger and more organised than the realm he inherited. Yet power brings dangerous question. A conquered territory must be governed, an army must be paid, local elites must accept new authority, even when they resent the man who holds it. Every victory produces another family with reasons to oppose the throne. The ruler understands this clearly. In 1741, Travancore's forces defeated the Dutch East India Company at the Battle of Colachel. The event became one of the most remarkable reversals in the region's history. A European trading power, armed with coastal ambitions and military experience, had been checked by an Indian kingdom. The victory strengthened Marthandavarma's reputation. It also expanded his responsibilities beyond anything ordinary royal custom could easily contain. He now governed through soldiers, officials, land revenues, alliances, and sacred authority. Then, in 1750, he made an extraordinary decision. The ruler ceremonially dedicated his kingdom to Padmanabha, the divine figure worshipped within the great temple. He did not merely offer jewels, land, or a single victory. He presented the entire state as sacred property. The meaning was immense. Marthandavarma declared himself the servant of Padmanabha rather than the independent owner of Travancore. His successors inherited the same idea. They would govern not as absolute masters, but as earthly stewards acting beneath the divine sovereigns. The crown remained visible. The ownership changed in principle. You picture the ceremony unfolding in restrained silence. Oil lamps glow against polished metal. Priests stand near the inner sacred space, while royal attendants hold ceremonial objects with careful hands. The ruler approaches without the noise of a military triumph. His sword carries special meaning. Traditional accounts describe Marthandavarma placing his royal sword before the deity as a sign of surrender. The weapon represented conquest, punishment, protection, and legal authority. By laying it down, he symbolically returned every victory to a power greater than himself. The story continues with a striking detail. The sword was supposedly returned to him, not as personal property, but as an instrument of sacred service. This account belongs partly to royal tradition, and historians treat its details cautiously. Still, the image survived. A king lowers his sword, a servant receives it. The ceremony transformed political language throughout Travancore. Royal orders, public rituals, and court customs increasingly presented government as service to the temple's divine ruler. The human monarch became a representative whose legitimacy depended upon humility. Naturally, this humility came with an army. The arrangement was spiritually powerful and politically useful. By placing the kingdom under divine ownership, Marthandavarma raised his authority above ordinary noble rivalry. Opposing the ruler could now appear dangerously close to opposing the sacred order itself. Records from Travancore confirm that the royal household continued using titles that emphasized service to Padmanabha. The formula endured across generations, shaping coronations, administration, diplomacy, and public ceremony. Historians connected with Oxford and Yale have examined similar acts of sacred kingship across Asia. Their studies show how rulers could limit personal claims while strengthening institutional authority. Surrender sometimes became another form of control. The contradiction is gentle but unmistakable. Marthandavarma claimed less for himself and created a stronger throne. By declaring the kingdom sacred property, he offered his successors a permanent source of legitimacy. Their government became attached to something older, holier, and harder to challenge than one family's ambition. Scholars still debate the ruler's deepest motive. Some interpret the dedication as sincere devotion shaped by personal religious conviction. Others view it as a brilliant solution to political instability. Many suspect that devotion and strategy were woven together. Human motives rarely arrive alone. You walk through an imagined council chamber, where palm leaf records rest beside bundles of accounts. Officials calculate land revenue, military expenses, temple obligations, and payments to local administrators. Sacred kingship does not remove bureaucracy. It gives bureaucracy a halo. The kingdom's resources now carries two identities. They support roads, soldiers, officials, palaces, and diplomatic missions. They also belong, at least in principle, to the divine ruler within the temple. This distinction affects how wealth is understood. A jewel offered by the royal family is not simply a luxurious object. It becomes part of an ongoing relationship between state and sanctuary. A grant of land becomes both economic policy and sacred duty. A military success becomes another reason for ceremonial thanksgiving. The temple gathers authority without marching anywhere. Royal processions reinforce the system through public display. The human ruler participates as a servant, walking or standing beneath symbols that remind everyone of the divine hierarchy. Court etiquette turns political theory into visible movement. The message is clear. Travancore has a sovereign. That sovereign is not human. One peculiar tradition claims that royal family members were expected to report their daily responsibilities to the deity through formal ritual. The divine ruler was treated almost like an unseen monarch receiving updates from loyal officials. Such practices are difficult to verify in every detail, but they reflect the seriousness of the relationship. The arrangement shaped foreign diplomacy as well. European officers and company representatives encountered a kingdom whose ruler claimed delegated authority rather than ordinary ownership. This complicated simple assumptions about monarchy, because treaties involved a government that described itself as sacred service. British officials sometimes treated the language as ceremonial. Travancore's court treated it as constitutional identity. The difference mattered whenever questions of property, succession, taxation, or temple control appeared. Researchers at the University of Chicago and Stanford have explored how religious institutions can function as legal personalities across long periods. A sacred figure may possess land, receive gifts, employ servants, and remain symbolically present through political change. A human ruler dies. The divine owner does not. This continuity offered Travancore unusual stability. Each successor entered an existing structure of obligation. He inherited neither complete freedom nor simple possession. He inherited service, ritual expectation, and the duty to protect property understood as sacred. The royal family's identity became inseparable from guardianship. Their prestige depended upon preserving the temple, supporting its ceremonies, and defending its status. Any failure could become both political embarrassment and spiritual danger. You sense the pressure behind the grandeur. A young heir grows up beneath portraits of disciplined rulers. He learns court procedure, military history, religious duty, and the language of submission. His future power is presented as responsibility rather than privilege. Yet every palace contains ambition. Some rulers embraced the role more deeply than others. Some governed effectively, while others faced financial strain, colonial pressure, family disputes, or administrative weakness. The sacred dedication did not remove ordinary human difficulty. It made failure more complicated. The kingdom's wealth could never be discussed as merely royal fortune. Temple property, state resources, family possessions, and ceremonial objects existed within overlapping systems. Boundaries were understood through custom, but custom does not always survive political change cleanly. This uncertainty would become increasingly important as princely rule weakened under modern law. A treasury protected by royal duty could become difficult to classify once royal authority lost its former position. For the moment, the palace remains calm. Rain touches the garden leaves, and servants close wooden screens against the damp wind. Somewhere within the temple, a lamp is raised before the reclining divine figure. The flame reflects briefly in gold, polished stone, and watchful eyes. Marthanda Varma's surrender has created a lasting paradox. He gave away everything. His dynasty became stronger. The kingdom now belonged to a presence that could not sign documents, command troops, or speak during disputes. Human servants would interpret that silent ownership for generations, and within that silence, royal wealth slowly became sacred inheritance. The first object enters the darkness without ceremony. A small coin rests inside a folded cloth and still warm from the hand that carried it. You cannot know who leaves it there. The donor may be a merchant, a widow, a sailor, or a royal official. No inscription preserves the moment. The coin joins other offerings inside a chamber where lamps burn only briefly. A keeper records its weight, perhaps its metal, then closes the container. Wood creaks under careful hands. A latch settles into place. Another gift follows. Centuries of treasure do not arrive as one glittering flood. They gather through repeated acts, each small enough to seem ordinary. A bracelet enters during a festival. A chain arrives after a successful harvest. A ruler sends vessels following a political victory. The underground rooms slowly become heavy with gratitude. Kerala stands beside one of the oldest maritime crossroads in the Indian Ocean. Ships travel from Arabian ports, Eastern Africa, the Persian Gulf, and distant parts of Asia. Traders seek pepper, cardamom, ivory, timber, pearls, and fine cloth. The coast smells of salt and spice. Sailors wait for seasonal winds that can carry them across open water with remarkable speed. Those same winds can also destroy hulls, scatter cargo, and leave men praying beneath black-skid skies. A safe return often demands thanks. You imagine a merchant stepping ashore after months at sea. His beard holds salt. His clothing smells of rope, oil, and wet timber. Behind him, workers unload jars, bundles, and sealed boxes while harbour officials watch every movement. He carries something mostula toward the temple. Perhaps it is a foreign coin received in trade. Perhaps it is a ring promised during a storm. The object changes meaning when it crosses the sacred threshold. Its commercial value remains, but its personal purpose becomes more important. It is payment to memory. Archaeological research from the University of Pennsylvania and Oxford has shown how deeply southern India belonged to ancient maritime exchange. Roman coins, West Asian ceramics, and imported goods appear across coastal sites. These discoveries confirm that distant economies touched local lives long before modern empires arrived. Trade leaves unusual traces. A coin minted beneath a foreign ruler may travel through several hands before reaching a temple store. Its portrait means little to the final donor. Its weight matters more, followed by the promise attached to it. Gold speaks many languages. Temple accountants must translate devotion into categories. They count coins, inspect ornaments, record measurements, and separate usable objects from ceremonial ones. Their work requires patience, memory, and a slightly suspicious respect for human generosity. Not every offering is convenient. A family may donate an heirloom too distinctive to melt. A royal household may present a ceremonial crown meant for rare festivals. A merchant guild may offer a heavy lamp requiring several men to lift. Storage becomes a sacred problem. Containers fill with coins of different sizes and origins. Cloth bundles protect delicate ornaments. Bronze vessels hold smaller objects, while wooden chests receive heavier collections. Labels are tied, copied, replaced, and occasionally misunderstood. The chambers develop their own quiet geography. Objects needed for regular ceremonies remain accessible. Rarely used treasures move deeper into storage. Gifts carrying exceptional religious importance may receive protection beyond their monetary value. Some items disappear from ordinary sight for generations. Records from South Indian temples confirm that donations often included land, grain, lamps, jewellery, livestock, and precious metal. Land produced income, while grain supported workers and rituals. Gold could remain stored, be reshaped, or enter ceremonial use. The temple becomes a place where value changes form. A field becomes rice. Rice becomes wages. Wages support worship. A necklace becomes light reflected during a festival. The chain connecting these things is rarely simple. Kings also contribute wealth for reasons beyond private devotion. A ruler may offer jewels to celebrate accession, military success, marriage, or recovery from illness. Royal gifts announce humility while displaying abundance, with almost impressive efficiency. The message reaches several audiences. Priests see duty, subjects see generosity, rivals see resources. The divine recipient, being solent, avoids commenting on the politics. Over time, royal offerings grow more elaborate. Gold vessels, jeweled ornaments, decorated weapons, and ceremonial clothing enter the temple's care. Some objects appear only during major observances, then return to guarded rooms. Others never emerge again. Political instability can encourage deeper concealment. War, invasion, rebellion, and disputed succession make visible treasure dangerous. A chest displayed proudly during peace may vanish beneath stone when soldiers approach. You hear hurried footsteps in a dark passage. Servants carry boxes downward while rain strikes the roof above. Orders pass in lowered voices, doors close, and keys move into trusted hands. What begins as temporary protection can become permanent secrecy. Years pass. The people who remember the arrangement grow old. A new generation inherits the keys, but not every explanation. One register is damaged by moisture, another disappears during administrative change. A chamber once known for a particular purpose becomes simply old storage. Silence thickens around it. Historians at Yale and Harvard have studied how sacred treasuries blur the boundaries between public wealth, royal property, and religious ownership. Their work reveals a persistent scholarly debate. Were such collections primarily devotional deposits, protected state reserve, or both at once? The answer may change from object to object. A pilgrim's earring carries one history, a royal crown carries another. Foreign coins may represent trade, taxation, diplomatic gifts, or emergency savings placed under sacred protection. The chamber does not explain the difference. One curious detail appears in descriptions of temple wealth across the region. Offerings sometimes imitate ordinary objects in precious metal. Tiny fruits, miniature vessels, small animals, and symbolic body parts can represent requests, recoveries, or fulfilled vows. A golden coconut may look almost playful. Its meaning may be deeply serious. A mother could offer a small metal cradle after a child's birth. A sailor might dedicate a miniature boat after surviving dangerous waters. A craftsman may present a tiny tool connected to his livelihood. These objects preserve intimate fears. Their makers transform daily life into durable symbols. Wood decays, fruit spoils, and cloth fades. Gold remains, waiting in darkness long after the original prayer becomes impossible to recover. You walk through an imagined storeroom filled with such fragments. Dust rests along chest lids. Metal touches metal with a faint, dry sound. The air carries traces of oil, old timber, and sealed earth. Nothing moves without permission. A keeper checks a list beneath the lamplight. He knows that every item carries obligation. Losing a royal gift could invite punishment. Mishandling a sacred ornament could bring something worse than official anger. Responsibility becomes inheritance. The treasure therefore grows through discipline as much as generosity. Generations of workers count, wrap, carry, repair, and guard objects they do not own. Their names seldom survive, although their caution allows the collection to endure. Prestigious studies from Sanford have explored how institutions preserve wealth through repeated routines rather than heroic decisions. The principle feels especially clear here. A treasury survives because ordinary people perform careful tasks correctly, again and again. The accumulation continues slowly. Monsoon seasons darken the walls, dynasties rise and weaken, trade routes shift, currencies change, and ships arrive beneath different flags. Pilgrims continue bringing what they can spare. Some bring fortunes, others bring almost nothing. A single coin can still represent a month of labour, a narrow escape, or the final possession of someone seeking mercy. Its weight is modest, but its story may be enormous. Then the object enters storage. The chamber receives it without judgment, placing royal splendour beside private desperation. Gold from distant ports rests near jewellery worn by local families. Foreign coins mingle with sacred vessels shaped by regional craftsmen. Time removes the hierarchy. Beneath the floor, every offering becomes part of the same long silence. No donor can reclaim it. No ruler can fully control its future. The collection grows beyond individual intention. What begins as gratitude becomes history. What begins as wealth becomes mystery. Hand stone, patient and cool, accepts the burden without revealing how much it holds. The chamber receives a letter. Nothing about the designation sounds ancient. There is no royal title, sacred epithet, or poetic warning carved into stone. An investigator simply marks the entrance as Vault A, and the old darkness gains a modern name. Then another chamber becomes Vault B. Others receive the letters C, D, E, and F. The sequence appears practical, almost modest, designed for inventories, reports, security plans, and legal discussion. A letter allows several people to refer to the same space without relying upon uncertain local descriptions. Order begins with language. You stand inside a temple whose rooms developed across centuries. Yet modern administration asks for a clean map. Officials need to know which entrance leads where, which lock has been examined, and which chamber contains particular objects. The alphabet offers a simple structure for a complicated place. Still, the letters conceal differences. One vault may be entered through a narrow doorway near a familiar corridor. Another may lie behind several barriers, below floor level, or beyond a space used for ritual storage. Some chambers contain objects arranged for access. Others appear designed for long concealment. A label cannot describe atmosphere. Vault A might look harmless on paper. Beneath the temple, however, it becomes a physical space filled with dust, metal, stone, weakened containers, and stale air. The letter does not mention the weight of the door or the uncertainty behind it. The same is true of every designation. Court-appointed observers begin recording the underground layout with unusual care. They note entrances, internal barriers, available keys, and signs of earlier access. They compare testimony from temple servants with the condition of doors and locks. Memory becomes evidence. An elderly keeper may remember a chamber being open during a ceremonial need. Another may insist that a certain entrance remained untouched throughout his lifetime. A third might recall hearing about repairs performed by men who are no longer alive. The statements rarely fit together perfectly. Living institutions often rely upon practical knowledge passed from person to person. One worker knows which key sticks during the rainy season, another knows where moisture gathers behind a wall. Someone else remembers which chest must never be moved without witnesses. Such knowledge may never enter formal records. The alphabetical system therefore does more than identify rooms. It translates inherited practice into administrative categories. What priests call sacred storage becomes a numbered task. What guards know as a troublesome lock becomes a security concern. The translation is never complete. Records confirm that the modern inspection identified 6 principal vaults beneath the temple, commonly marked by the letters A through F. Some had been accessed at different times for practical or ceremonial reasons. Others carried stronger restrictions and greater uncertainty. The letters suggest equality. The chambers do not. Vault C, D, E and F are often described as connected to objects needed for temple functions. Their contents could include ceremonial vessels, ornaments, lamps, or items stored between occasions of use. Access might be controlled, but it was not necessarily unimaginable. Vault A presents a different scale. Accounts of its inspection describe large quantities of precious material, including coins, ornaments, vessels, and sacred objects. The chamber becomes difficult to understand as ordinary storage. Its contents represent long accumulation rather than one period of deposit. Each container creates another problem. An inventory must identify what can be seen without damaging anything. Coins may be stuck together by age, dirt, or corrosion from neighbouring materials. Cloth wrappings may have weakened. Wooden boxes may no longer support their own weight. Opening a chest can become an act of conservation. You picture a committee gathered around one container beneath electric lamps. The light reveals gold through torn fabric, but it also reveals insects, dust, and brittle wood. Every movement threatens to disturb an arrangement preserved by stillness. Someone begins counting. The work is slow. A coin must be lifted, examined, described, and placed safely. An ornament may contain stones requiring separate identification. A vessel might appear solid until its thin surface bends beneath careless pressure. Treasure behaves like fragile evidence. Researchers at institutions such as Harvard and the University of Pennsylvania have long emphasized that archaeological context matters as much as the object itself. position, container, surrounding material. An order can reveal how something was stored and misdone. A hurried inventory can destroy that information. The investigators therefore face competing demands. The court requires accountability, conservators require patience, temple authorities require respect for sacred restrictions, security officials require secrecy about routes, locks, and storage arrangements. Every demand is reasonable. Together, they become exhausting. A peculiar story circulates that the alphabet was chosen per older chamber names were too sacred to repeat publicly. There is no firm evidence for this claim. The tale survives because people dislike believing that mysterious spaces can be reduced to office language. Yet office language has powers. Once a chamber becomes volte, it enters legal reality. Judges can mention it. Committees can assign responsibility for it. Newspapers can report on it. Security officers can design procedures around it. The letter creates a public identity. Vault B acquires the heaviest burden. Its label is no more dramatic than the others. Yet it gradually becomes associated with refusal, warning, and uncertainty. The simplicity of the name makes the fear surrounding it seem even stranger. A blank letter invites imagination. Some observers distinguish between the chamber itself and the series of doors leading toward it. This distinction matters because people often speak as though one final entrance separates the world from the unknown. In reality, underground storage may involve an outer gate, a small room, another barrier, and then a deeper enclosure. Mapping becomes interpretation. Which barrier marks the vault? Where does sacred restriction begin? Does an antechamber belong to the same protected space, or is it merely a passage? Scholars continue debating how modern surveys should describe sacred architecture without imposing misleading categories. Researchers at Stanford and the University of Chicago have noted that legal maps often demand fixed boundaries, while ritual spaces may operate through degrees of access. A corridor can become sacred during one ceremony and practical during another. A doorway may be crossed by certain priests but not by other temple workers. A room may be open for one purpose and forbidden for all others. The map cannot easily show this. Lines on paper appear firm. Ritual boundaries depend upon time, identity, intention, and authority. The same threshold can mean several things to different people standing beside it. You look again at the sequence of letters A, B, C, D, E, F. They seem calm and orderly. They belong to filing cabinets, diagrams, and typed reports. They do not reveal which chamber smells of old cloth, which doorway scrapes against the floor, or which lock requires two hands. They do not record hesitation. An official approaching a vault must trust that the designation matches the physical entrance. A temple representative must decide how much inherited knowledge can be shared. A guard must remember who entered, when they entered, and what they carried. Every visit leaves paperwork. Signatures accumulate around the chambers just as offerings once did. Names, dates, seals, and witness statements become a second treasury, made from documentation rather than gold. This new treasury protects responsibility. It also spreads it. No single person can later claim complete ignorance. No single witness can quietly redefine what happened. The alphabet fixes each chamber within a network of recorded decisions. The old rooms acquire modern shadows. Vault A becomes associated with vast visible wealth. Vault B becomes associated with what remains inaccessible. The remaining letters settle into quieter roles, though their contents and purposes still matter to temple life. The sequence now carries a hierarchy never intended by the alphabet itself. One letter shines, one letter darkens. The others wait between them. As the survey continues, the underground plan grows clearer without becoming fully understandable. Officials can identify entrances, count locks, and mark relative positions, yet the meaning of each chamber remains tied to custom, history, and belief. A map can show where a door stands. It cannot show why generations stopped at it. The letters remain on the page, neat and obedient. Beneath them, stone passages hold their silence with far less cooperation. And the alphabet, designed to simplify the mystery, quietly gives it 6 new names. The lock yields with a reluctant click, and stale air moves across the threshold. You feel the temperature change first. The chamber beyond seems cooler than the corridor, with a dry mineral scent beneath traces of wood, oil, and old cloth. Electric lamps enter slowly, revealing walls that have watched generations pass without daylight. No single object commands the room. Instead, abundance arrives in layers. Wooden containers lean against stone. Metal vessels rest beneath folded fabric. Coins spill from weakened sacks, forming dull mounds that brighten wherever the light touches them. The first impression is not elegance. It is weight. Gold is surprisingly heavy when gathered in quantity. A chain that appears delicate can strain both hands. A ceremonial vessel may require several people to lift it safely. Even coins, individually small, become difficult to move once thousands share the same container. The investigators proceed carefully. Each visible object must be counted, described, photographed, and protected. Temple representatives watch the handling, while security officers control movement near the chamber. No one can simply carry treasure into better light and arrange it for admiration. The room is not an exhibition. It is evidence. Records from the inspection describe gold coins from several periods, some linked to rulers and trading worlds far beyond southern India. There are ornaments, precious stones, ritual vessels, and sacred images crafted with extraordinary skill. Long chains appear beside smaller devotional objects. The collection refuses a single date. One coin may belong to a European kingdom. Another may come from an Indian dynasty, whose authority vanished centuries ago. A third may have crossed the Arabian Sea inside a merchant's purse before entering sacred storage. Every piece travelled differently. Researchers from Oxford and the University of Pennsylvania have shown how coin collections can reveal forgotten networks of commerce. Metal survives where letters and cloth disappear, allowing economic history to remain hidden in plain sight. A coin records movement without words. Its design identifies a government, but its scratches describe use. A clipped edge may suggest testing or adjustment. A hole can indicate that someone once wore it rather than spent it. Then it entered darkness. Among the objects are ceremonial forms never intended for ordinary exchange. Gold vessels, crowns, necklaces, and ornamented coverings belong to a world where wealth served ritual beauty. Their value could not be reduced to material weight alone. A sacred object has 2 lives. One life belongs to craftsmanship. It can be measured, dated, and compared with similar works. The other belongs to worship, where touch, prayer, and ceremonial use create meanings that no laboratory can fully recover. This difference complicates every inventory. An official may describe a golden image by dimensions, weight, and estimated age. A priest may recognize it through a festival, a vow, or a sequence of gestures known only within the temple. Both descriptions are true. Neither is complete. The chamber also contains precious stones whose identities require patient examination. Diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and other gems can resemble one another beneath poor lighting or layers of dust. Some stones may have been recut, repaired, or moved between settings across generations, or a jewel can outlive its original design. One curious account mentions a great golden chain of such length that it seemed intended for monumental display rather than personal use. Stories surrounding its dimensions vary, as stories involving gold often develop healthy appetites. Still, enormous ceremonial chains are historically plausible. They could adorn a sacred image, a processional structure, or part of the temple during an important festival. Their size communicates devotion through excess, turning precious metal into visible reverence. You imagine craftsmen producing such an object. Small links pass from one skilled hand to another. Metal is heated, shaped, joined, tested, and polished. The work may continue for months beneath the patronage of a ruler or wealthy donor. Then the chain appears in ceremony. Lamps multiply across its surface, and every movement releases another wave of reflected light. Music fills the courtyard, Crowds see it only briefly before attendants carry it away. Eventually it vanishes into stridge. The chamber preserves the final stage, not the full performance. This is why scholars debate whether the opened vault should be understood primarily as a treasury, a ritual archive, or a collection of historical deposits. Historians at Yale and Harvard have explored similar questions in temples and royal foundations. The disagreement remains open. Calling it a treasury emphasizes wealth and protection. Calling it an archive emphasizes memory and evidence. Calling it sacred property emphasizes continuing religious meaning. The same object can inhabit all three categories. Modern estimates of the collection's monetary value spread rapidly. Numbers rise into astonishing ranges, repeated through newspapers, conversations, and television reports. Yet such estimates are uncertain because many objects are unique and cannot be priced like ordinary bullion. Melting value is only the lowest measures. Historical value depends upon rarity, condition, provenance, and cultural importance. Religious value may reject market comparison entirely. A coin can be sold. A sacred crown with centuries of ceremonial meaning cannot be understood so easily. The language of price begins to fail. Conservators face practical difficulties beneath the excitement. Gold itself resists corrosion, but neighbouring materials may decay. Wood cracks, silk weakens, leather dries. Iron fittings produce stains and expansion. The treasure survives unevenly. A golden ornament may remain brilliant while the fabric supporting it turns to powder. A chest can preserve coins but collapse when lifted. A sealed bundle may contain both precious material and fragile organic remains. Science advises restraint. Research published in journals such as Nature and Science has demonstrated how environmental change can damage archaeological materials after discovery. Air, light, humidity, and handling may begin processes that stillness had delayed. Opening a chamber changes it. The investigators therefore confront a strange truth. Discovery itself can become a threat. Every object brought into view gains attention while losing the protection of stable darkness. You hear the soft sound of coin shifting. It is not musical. The sound is dry, dense, and almost domestic, like grain moving inside a storage jar. Yet each small piece may represent a ruler, a voyage, or a private act of surrender. Numbers cannot preserve that intimacy. 10,000 coins sound impressive. One coin offered by a frightened sailor contains a human life. The inventor counts objects, but history asks who touched them. Most answers are gone. The opened chamber creates another difficulty. Once the world learns that such wealth exists, security becomes permanent. Guards increase, surveillance expands, access narrows. Every movement requires witnesses, records, and formal permission. Treasure demands its own machinery. Protecting it costs money, discipline, and trust. The greater the value becomes in public imagination, the harder it is to allow scholars, conservators, or worshippers near the collection. Visibility creates distance. Some objects may eventually receive detailed study. Coins could help refine trade histories. Artistic styles may reveal workshops and regional connections. Inscriptions might identify donors or ceremonial uses. Other objects may remain poorly understood for years. The quantity itself becomes an obstacle. Specialists need time, equipment, and controlled conditions. Temple authorities must also decide which forms of examination respect religious restrictions. Patience becomes essential. You watch the light move across the chamber walls. It catches a vessel rim, then disappears into a heap of coins. A jeweled surface flashes once and becomes dark again. The treasure seems almost alive under shifting illumination. Yet it is silent. No object explains why it was given, who carried it underground, or why it remained untouched. The opened vault reveals material abundance while preserving human absence. That absence changes the mood. This is not merely a room filled with wealth, it is a gathering of vanished intentions. Gratitude, fear, pride, ambition, and hope have hardened into metal and stone. The chamber stands exposed. Its mystery does not end, it simply changes shape. The passage narrows as the air grows still around you. Stone presses close on either side, and the light seems weaker near the sealed entrance. Several officials stand quietly, each aware that this chamber is not being treated like the others. Its difference is procedural. Vault B is approached through a sequence of barriers rather than one easily described doorway. Accounts mention outer access points, internal closures, and an entrance associated with stricter ritual concern. The chamber cannot be reduced to a single lock waiting for a key. Every barrier carries meaning. Temple authorities object to opening the innermost space without specific religious approval. Their concern does not arise from ordinary inconvenience or hesitation. They argue that the chamber belongs to a category of sacred restriction beyond administrative inspection. The distinction matters greatly. A storeroom can be inventoried. A sanctified enclosure requires permission shaped by ritual, lineage, and inherited responsibility. The same physical space may appear practical to an official and spiritually dangerous to a priest. Neither side can simply ignore the other. The legal team works under instructions to identify and protect temple property. Their responsibility demands clarity, documentation, and secure accounting. Yet court authority encounters a living tradition that understands certain boundaries as permanent. The doorway becomes a legal question. Can a chamber remain closed when no complete public inventory exists? Can religious custodians refuse access to property under judicial review? Does protection require opening, or can opening itself violate the duty to protect? No answer feels neutral. You notice how the people near the entrance lower their voices. This may be respect, caution, or the natural effect of standing underground. Even practical conversation becomes subdued inside thick masonry. Someone checks a document. Another person studies the door. A priest waits without moving. Records confirm that the committee did not complete the opening of Vault B during the major inventory process. Religious objections played a central role, and the chamber remained outside the full examination applied elsewhere. This fact creates public suspicion. Many observers assume that refusal must conceal an even greater quantity of wealth. The logic seems simple. If opened rooms contain extraordinary objects, then the room protected most fiercely must contain something greater. History rarely obeys such tidy logic. Sacred restrictions often concern purpose rather than material value. A chamber may be important because of what it represents, not because of what it stores. An empty room can remain spiritually significant if tradition treats it as reserved space. The public imagination prefers gold. Temple representatives describe the chamber with caution, often emphasizing its distinct ritual status. They do not necessarily provide one unified explanation. Different custodians may understand the restriction through different traditions, responsibilities, or inherited warnings. Silence allows those differences to remain hidden. The committee must decide whether to press forward. Force could damage more than a physical barrier. It could provoke religious outrage, undermine trust, and create accusations that legal authority had entered a sacred domain without restraint. Restraint also carries consequences. Leaving the chamber unopened means accepting incomplete knowledge. Officials cannot verify its interior condition, identify possible hazards, or account for whatever may be stored there. Every unanswered question remains active. The decision becomes heavier than the door. Historians at the University of Chicago and Yale have studied conflicts between sacred access and state oversight. Their work shows that modern law often expects spaces to be either public or private. Ritual spaces can follow far more complicated rules. Access may depend upon identity. A hereditary priest might enter where a senior official cannot. A room may open only during a rare ceremony. Certain objects may be visible only under prescribed conditions, while others remain permanently concealed. The restriction form a system. Modern administration prefers universal procedures. Sacred tradition often depends upon exceptions. When these systems meet, both sides may believe the other has misunderstood the nature of responsibility. You can feel that misunderstanding in the corridor. The official sees an unverified chamber beneath a protected monument. The priest sees a boundary inherited from people whose authority cannot be reproduced through paperwork. Each person fears a different kind of damage. One fears neglect. the other fears violation. A curious belief claims that the chamber should not be opened because its silence forms part of the temple's spiritual balance. In this version, the sealed condition is not merely defensive, the closure itself performs a sacred function. No archaeological evidence contests that claim. The idea belongs to ritual imagination, yet it reveals why ordinary compromise becomes difficult. An engineer might suggest opening the space carefully, examining it, then sealing it again. That solution appears reasonable only if closure is practical rather than sacred. Some thresholds cannot be restored by replacing a lock. The moment of crossing changes them. Researchers at Oxford have examined how restricted spaces gain power through controlled absence. A chamber hidden from view may shape belief more strongly than an object displayed publicly. Secrecy protects authority by limiting who can confirm or challenge the tradition. This creates an open, scholarly debate. Some specialists argue that respecting such restrictions is essential when studying living religious institutions. Others maintain that extraordinary historical and financial importance requires transparent examination under careful supervision. Both positions claim to defend the temple. One protects continuity. The other protects accountability. You imagine a conversation held outside the underground passage. Lawyers speak about constitutional duties and public trusts. Religious representatives speak about inherited obligations and ritual consequences. Security officers worry about theft, rumour, and public disorder. No one discusses curiosity alone. Yet curiosity fills the room. The chamber's refusal to become visible gives it a strange authority. Every person who leaves without entering carries away a private image of what might be inside. Those images grow more elaborate with distance. Some picture endless school. Others imagine sacred objects too powerful for ordinary sight. More cautious minds consider records, empty containers, damaged structures, or materials requiring conservation. The chamber accepts every possibility. Its silence does not confirm any of them. The Supreme Court process places unusual pressure on this uncertainty. Courts are designed to resolve disputes through evidence, testimony, and written reasoning. Vault B offers limited evidence and several competing traditions. The law can order a door opened. Whether it should do so is another question. Prestigious legal research from Stanford has explored how courts handle religious claims without deciding whether the beliefs themselves are true. Judges often examine sincerity, institutional practice, public interest, and constitutional protection. They do not test sacred danger directly. A court cannot measure spiritual disturbance with ordinary evidence. It can only determine how much weight society should give to those who believe such disturbance is possible. This makes the sealed chamber unusually difficult. The objection does not need to convince every observer. It only needs to establish that opening the space may cause serious religious harm to a community entrusted with its care. Public pressure continues growing. Rumours spread through conversations, newspapers, and television discussions. Each retelling removes another layer of caution. A delayed inspection becomes a forbidden entrance. Disputed chamber becomes an impossible door. The mystery improves with repetition. Officials respond by tightening security and limiting information. These measures protect the site, but they also make the chamber seem even more extraordinary. Secrecy produces rumours, and rumours produce stronger demands for secrecy. The cycle closes around itself. Inside the passage, none of that noise is audible. The stone walls hold only small sounds, including cloth shifting, paper turning, and breath moving through warm air. The barrier remains unmoved. You sense that the chamber has already changed everyone near it. The officials have learned that authority can pause. The custodians have learned that inherited silence may require public defense. The outside world has learned that wealth does not guarantee access. Nothing has been revealed, yet something has been established. Vault B is no longer simply an underground room. It has become a boundary between two systems of truth, each convinced that caution belongs on its side. The corridor empties gradually. Lights withdraw across the floor, leaving the entrance in shadow once more. Locks remain in place. documents remain incomplete, and responsibility passes into another day. The chamber stays closed. Its power grows quietly. The entrance appears less like a single door and more like a sequence of refusals. You stand within a narrow stone passage where the air feels dry against your throat. Light reaches the first barrier, then fades along the edges of older masonry. Metal fittings glimmer faintly beneath dust, while wooden surfaces absorb nearly everything. The legend prefers simplicity. It imagines one ancient doorway, carved with serpents and sealed by forgotten power. Behind it waits a chamber untouched by human hands. One lock, one warning, one irreversible choice. The physical evidence is less cooperative. Descriptions gathered from temple representatives, officials, and local memory suggest several layers of access. An outer metal barrier may lead toward a wooden doorway. Another enclosure may stand farther inside, followed by stonework, fitted panels, or a final closure whose exact form remains disputed. Each witness remembers something different. One person recalls heavy ironwork darkened by age. Another describes thick timber strengthened with metal. Someone else speaks of a stone barrier that appears almost continuous with the wall itself. No description settles the matter. The confusion may arise because witnesses reach different points within the passage. One person may have seen only the outer gate. Another may have entered an intermediate space. A third may be repeating details heard from an older custodian rather than observed directly. Memory builds architecture from fragments. You imagine the first gate opening with a scrape that travels through the corridor. Rust shifts inside the hinges. A keeper applies pressure to a stubborn latch, then pauses as the frame resists. The sound is painfully ordinary. There is no thunder beneath the ground. No wind rises from the chamber. Wood complains, metal grinds, and dust drops from a joint disturbed after years of stillness. Old doors rarely behave gracefully. Moisture swells timber during the rainy season. Metal expands, corrodes, and binds against surrounding material. Stone floors settle unevenly beneath immense weight. A latch once moved easily can become fixed through nothing more mysterious than time. Engineers know this problem well. Research conducted at institutions such as Stanford and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology has shown how historic structures respond to humidity, pressure, and gradual material fatigue. Doors and frames become part of the building's changing load, especially in enclosed spaces with limited ventilation. A resistant entrance does not prove supernatural protection. It may prove excellent carpentry. The builders could have designed the barriers to discourage fire, theft, insects, dampness, and sudden intrusion. Thick wood absorbs impact. Metal fittings strengthen weak points. Stone reduces access and regulates temperature. Several layers create delay. Delay is valuable in any treasury. A thief who reaches one barrier still faces another. Guards gain time to respond. Noise travels outward, announcing forced entry before the deepest space is reached. Security becomes architecture. Records from old temple and palace complexes across southern India confirm that valuable storage often relied upon multiple closures. Keys could be divided among different custodians, preventing one individual from entering alone. The method protects both treasure and reputation. A keeper cannot easily be accused of secret access if another person controls the inner lock. Witnesses become part of the mechanism. Trust is distributed through wood, metal, stone, and human presence. The doorway is therefore not one object, it is a system. You notice a small iron ring set into the first barrier. Its surface is polished in one place, perhaps by repeated handling. Nearby, another fitting remains rough and dark, suggesting limited use or later replacement. Every repair complicates the age. A medieval wooden door may receive newer hinges. An older stone threshold may support a barrier installed during royal renovations. A lock can be replaced several times while the chamber behind it remains unchanged. Dating the entrance becomes uncertain. Historians at Oxford have studied how sacred buildings preserve old spatial boundaries beneath newer architectural layers. Their research suggests that a doorway may remain ritually ancient even when its physical materials are relatively recent. This distinction matters. A replacement door does not create a new boundary, it continues an older one. The wood may be 2 centuries old, while the restriction it represents may be far older. Scholars openly debate how much significance should be assigned to the surviving barriers themselves. Some believe their construction can reveal the chamber's original purpose. Others caution that centuries of repairs may have erased the earliest arrangement. The disagreement remains unresolved. A curious fringe tale claims that no keyhole exists on the final entrance. According to this story, the barrier responds only to a sacred sequence of sounds known to a vanished line of priests. The claim has no reliable physical confirmation, yet it survives because an ordinary lock feels inadequate for such a famous mystery. People expect a forbidden chamber to possess a forbidden mechanism. A simple latch disappoints the imagination. Other stories describe 2 sculpted serpents facing one another upon the doorway. Their presence is interpreted as a warning that the chamber belongs to powers beneath the earth or sea. Serpent imagery, however, appears widely in South Asian religious art. It can represent protection, fertility, water, kingship, hidden knowledge, or sacred presence. A carving does not explain itself. One viewer sees a guardian, another sees decoration. A third sees proof that disaster awaits anyone who crosses the threshold. The stone remains silent beneath every interpretation. Your hand hovers near the wooden surface without touching it. The grain is barely visible under age and darkness. Small cracks run along one panel, while metal bands hold the structure firmly against its frame. It looks vulnerable and stubborn at once. That contradiction defines many ancient doors. Their surfaces appear fragile, yet their construction resists movement. They survive because generations avoid forcing them. Respect becomes conservation. Modern investigators face a practical dilemma. Opening a warped barrier may require pressure, cutting, drilling, or partial dismantling. Any of these actions could damage material that carries historical values. A conservator would prefer slow examination. A security officer may prefer immediate certainty. A religious custodian may reject intervention entirely. The entrance remains closed because every professional duty points toward a different solution. Even identifying the final barrier poses difficulty. An outer gate may be called the door by one witness. A wooden panel beyond it may receive the same name from another. Public reports then combine both descriptions into a single legendary entrance. Complexity collapses into myth. You hear the imagined voices of workers discussing the problem in low tones. One suggests oiling the hinges, another warns that the frame has shifted, a third notices a hairline crack in nearby plaster. No one wants responsibility for the wrong movement. A door can be repaired. A sacred violation cannot be undone so easily. This fear slows every hand. The barrier gathers authority from the hesitation surrounding it. Its physical resistance becomes inseparable from moral resistance. The distinction disappears in memory. Years later, someone recalls that the door would not open. The statement becomes a claim that the door could not open. Then another voice insists that it was never meant to open. Language seals it again. The layered entrance therefore protects more than an interior chamber. It protects uncertainty itself. Each gate prevents observers from knowing exactly where the final boundary begins. Perhaps the outer barriers are ordinary security. Perhaps the deepest closure carries ritual significance. It's possible that later generations confused practical protection with sacred prohibition because both occupied the same narrow passage. The architecture allows both explanations. You withdraw your hand and listen. A faint sound moves through the masonry, perhaps water in a distant channel or wood adjusting under pressure. The noise is small, but the corridor enlarges it until it seems deliberate. Then it fades. The entrance remains a collection of materials, repairs, memories, and warnings. Metal guards wood, wood conceals stone, and stone hides whatever lies beyond. There is no single magical door. There is something more difficult to understand. A chain of thresholds, each asking a different reason to stop. Two serpents face one another in the stories told about the sealed threshold. You see their bodies curling along the imagined entrance, smooth and watchful beneath weak lamplight. Their heads rise near the centre, where no ordinary handle appears. Scales catch the glow, then disappear into shadow as the flame trembles. They seem patient. Across southern India, serpent figures belong to an ancient and complicated world of belief. They can represent water, fertility, protection, ancestry, hidden wealth, and the dangerous power of the earth. A serpent beside a doorway does not carry only one meaning. It can guard, it can bless, it can warn. In temple art, such figures often appear near sacred boundaries, wells, trees, shrines, and underground spaces. Their presence reflects a long association between serpents and places where the visible world touches something concealed. The earth keeps secrets. Roots move beneath stone. Water travels through channels no one sees. Buried chambers hold objects forgotten by the living. A creature that disappears into a narrow opening naturally becomes a symbol of hidden knowledge. You can understand the connection. A serpent lives close to the ground, silent and difficult to predict. It moves without footsteps and vanishes into cracks too small for human entry. To ancient observers, this behaviour could suggest access to another realm beneath ordinary life. Myth grows from attention. Records from early South Asian religious traditions confirm that serpent beings held important roles in stories. Ritual art and local worship, they were linked with rain, rivers, treasure, kingship, and the protection of sacred places. Researchers at Oxford and the University of Chicago have studied how these beliefs merged across centuries. Local guardian traditions entered larger religious systems without losing their older connection to land and water. The serpent remained adaptable. A village might honour it as the protector of a grove. A royal court could adopt it as a symbol of sovereignty. A temple artist might place it beside a divine figure, transforming local fear into sacred order. The image becomes familiar without becoming harmless. You walk through a quiet garden where stone serpent figures rest beneath broad leaves. Rain gathers in their carved eyes. Small lamps burn nearby, and flowers lie across the damp ground. No one raises their voice. These shrines often stand close to trees whose roots are left undisturbed. Families may visit them with requests connected to health, children, or household peace. The rituals vary widely, shaped by region and community. A small offering carries great seriousness. Milk is often mentioned in the popular stories about serpent worship, although real practices are more diverse. In some places, people leave flowers, turmeric, lamps, or other offerings near sacred stones. The serpent receives what memory prescribes. This background gives the threshold legend emotional force. If the chamber carries serpent imagery, believers may interpret the carving as more than decoration. It can become a sign that the sealed space belongs to a protected realm. Protection implies consequence. The most dramatic versions claim that anyone who opens the chamber improperly will face disaster. Flood, illness, political chaos, or death may follow, depending upon who tells the story. No single warning remains consistent. That inconsistency is revealing. A stable historical tradition usually preserves recognizable forms, even when details change. A modern rumor grows more freely, absorbing whatever fear feels most persuasive to its audience. One generation fears divine punishment, another fears structural collapse. A third fears that hidden wealth will bring corruption, theft, and conflict. The curse changes clothing. A particularly curious tale claims that the doorway is sealed by a sacred serpent knot. In this version, no metal tool can open it safely. Only a priest with perfect knowledge of an ancient chant can release the barrier. The required knowledge has supposedly vanished. This story belongs to folklore rather than verified history, yet its structure is familiar. Forbidden Place is protected by a lost skill, ensuring that modern people remain forever unqualified to enter. The mystery preserves itself neatly. You imagine the final priest carrying the knowledge through old age. He speaks the sounds only during rare ceremonies, perhaps to one chosen student. Then war, illness, or simple neglect breaks the chain. The words disappear. The door remains. Such stories offer an elegant explanation for restraint. No official must decide against opening the chamber because the proper method no longer exists. The responsibility belongs to time. Modern curiosity is defeated by missing tradition. Scholars openly debate whether serpent imagery at restricted sites should be interpreted through theology, local custom, royal symbolism, or later popular legend. Researchers at Yale have argued that sacred symbols often accumulate meanings rather than replacing older ones. A carving may begin with one purpose. Centuries later, worshippers understand it differently. Another generation adds a warning, and the warning becomes inseparable from the original image. The result is layered belief. Archaeologists prefer material evidence. They examine carving style, stone type, weathering, tool marks, and architectural position. These details can suggest when an image was made and whether it belonged to the original structure. They cannot reveal every meaning. A serpent carved during renovation may reproduce an older sacred symbol. A recent repair can preserve a tradition far older than the visible stone. Age and meaning do not always travel together. You look closely at the imagined figures. Their bodies may not be serpents at all. Decorative scrolls, ropes, vines, or protective bands can become animals when viewed through poor light and expectation. Human perception eagerly completes uncertain shapes. Fear sharpens the picture. Once someone describes two guarding serpents, later observers begin searching for heads, eyes, and coiled bodies. Ambiguous lines suddenly appear intentional. The legend teaches the eye. Prestigious research in psychology from Stanford has shown how expectation influences interpretation, especially when information is incomplete. People do not simply see objects. They see patterns shaped by memory, suggestion, and emotional context. A dark doorway encourages dramatic patterns. Still, dismissing the legend entirely would miss its social purpose. The serpent story discourages reckless entry. It creates a boundary stronger than an ordinary warning sign, especially within a community that respects sacred tradition. Fear can protect heritage. A thief may ignore a lock but hesitate before a curse. A careless official may reconsider force when public belief predicts disaster. The story becomes an informal security system maintained through repetition. No guard needs to stand there constantly. The serpent stands in imagination. This protective role may explain why the legend survives even among people who doubt its supernatural claims. They recognize that mystery can prevent intrusion more effectively than bureaucracy. There is gentle wisdom in that. Modern systems rely upon alarms, cameras, signatures, and controlled access. Older systems relied upon oath, taboo, reputation, and divine consequence. Both attempt to manage human temptation. Gold requires persuasion. Some people are persuaded by prison, others are persuaded by serpents. You hear rain falling somewhere beyond the thick walls. Water touches stone, travels through hidden channels, and gathers beneath the ground. The sound resembles a distant hiss when it passes through narrow openings. Perhaps that helped the legend grow. A sealed chamber near underground water would naturally produce strange noises during heavy rain. Air moving through cracks can whisper. Timber can creak as moisture changes its shape. The building speaks in ordinary ways. Listeners supply extraordinary meanings. An engineer hears pressure and movement. A priest hears a warning. A visitor hears whatever story arrived first. None can fully silence the others. The serpent guardians therefore exist in several forms at once. They are possible carvings, inherited symbols, public warnings, and creatures of rumour. They belong to art, religion, psychology, and architecture. Their greatest power comes from uncertainty. You do not need to believe in a curse to feel cautious near the threshold. The darkness, silence, and weight of tradition create their own authority. A hand reaches toward the barrier. Then it stops. The serpents do not move. They do not need to. Paper gathers around the sealed chamber like a second wall. You enter a room where court orders, temple registers, witness statements, and handwritten notes rest beneath slow-sealing fans. The air smells of dust, ink, and cloth files warmed by years of tropical weather. Every page promises clarity. Few pages provide it. One document describes an entrance open for inspection. Another refers to a chamber that remained inaccessible. A witness remembers keys being used during an earlier decade, while another insists that the deepest space was never crossed. The contradiction appears immediate, yet the records may describe different barriers. An outer room can be opened without entering the innermost enclosure. A metal gate may yield, while a wooden door remains closed. A passage can be inspected even when the final chamber stays untouched. Language compresses these distinctions. A clerk writes that the vault was opened. A priest later explains that only its outer portion was entered. A newspaper repeats the shorter version, and the public imagines the entire mystery exposed. The wording changes the event. Court records confirm that several temple chambers had histories of controlled access before the major judicial inventory. Some spaces held ritual objects needed for ceremonies, while others were entered for maintenance, accounting, or security. The sealed chamber stands apart because testimony about it remains unusually complicated. Certain records suggest that areas connected with the chamber were accessed during the late 20th and early 21st centuries. These references do not necessarily prove entry into the deepest enclosure. That distinction is essential. You imagine two officials examining an old register. One traces a faded line with his finger, while the other leans closer beneath the yellow light. The entry mentions a date, several witnesses, and the movement of objects. It does not describe the architecture. Was the recorded opening limited to an outer gate? Did workers enter an antechamber? Were items removed from a neighbouring storage area that later became associated with the sealed vault? The page refuses to explain. Older temple records often assume that contemporary readers already understand the building. A keeper does not describe every corridor because his colleagues know them. He records only what matters for responsibility. Future readers inherit the missing context. Researchers at Oxford and Harvard have shown how administrative documents can preserve precise details while concealing basic realities. A register may list weights, names, and dates accurately, yet never explain where a particular room stands. The record was created for management, not archaeology. Witness memory introduces another layer. An elderly temple servant may recall watching the men carry lamps toward the underground passage many decades earlier. He remembers the smell of oil, the sound of keys, and the anxiety among attendants. He may not know which doorway opened. Memory preserves that atmosphere better than floor plans. A former official might remember signing a document related to the chamber. Years later, he associates the signature with physical entry, even though he remained above ground. This does not make him dishonest. Human memory rebuilds events each time they are recalled. Details from conversations, reports, and later news can quietly attach themselves to genuine experience. Prestigious psychological research from Stanford and Yale has demonstrated how confidently people can remember events inaccurately. Confidence measures conviction, not perfect preservation. The sealed chamber encourages certainty. People dislike admitting that they stood near a famous mystery without understanding what happened. Memory supplies clean edges where experience offered only confusion. Temple traditions create another kind of testimony. Priests and hereditary custodians may preserve knowledge through spoken instruction rather than written explanation. Their accounts can contain information unavailable in official files. They also follow different standards. A ritual tradition may describe a chamber as unopened because no authorized sacred entry occurred. An administrator may call it opened because a lock was physically removed. Both statements can refer to the same day. The disagreement concerns meaning, not necessarily fact. Scholars at the University of Chicago continued debating how oral tradition should be weighed against legal documentation in living religious institutions. Written evidence appears stable, but it can be incomplete or poorly informed. Oral evidence changes with retelling. It can also preserve distinctions that clerks never considered important. You hear pages turning. A legal researcher compares signatures, dates, and descriptions across several files. The same chamber appears under slightly different names. One document uses a local term for a storage space. Another adopts an alphabetical label introduced much later. The names may not align perfectly. A curious archival problem arises when a room changes function without changing its name. A passage once used for temporary storage may later become associated with a deeper restricted space. Officials then inherit a misleading label. The reverse can also occur. One broad name may originally cover several connected rooms. Later investigators divide them into separate units, creating the appearance of contradictions where older writers saw none. Architecture shifts beneath vocabulary. One quirky account tells of a keeper who supposedly recognized chamber keys by touch in complete darkness. He could distinguish weight, tooth pattern, and worn edges without looking. Whether the story is accurate remains uncertain. It captures the intimacy of inherited responsibility. A key used across decades becomes familiar like a household tool, even when it guards objects no family could personally own. Keys themselves become evidence. A recently manufactured key suggests continued access or replacement. A heavily corroded key may indicate long disuse. Several keys for one entrance imply divided custody, emergency copies, or changing locks. Yet even keys can mislead. A lock may survive after its door is abandoned. A key may be preserved ceremonially long after it stops working. A newer lock can protect an ancient boundary. Material facts require interpretation. Court documents attempt to reduce this uncertainty through sworn statements and appointed committees. Witnesses identify what they saw, while officials record where disagreement remains. The process creates a hierarchy of evidence. Direct observation usually carries more weight than rumour. Contemporary notes generally outweigh memories formed decades later. Architectural examination can confirm whether a barrier appears recently disturbed. Still, no method recovers everything. The deepest chamber cannot testify without being opened, and opening it would alter the very condition under dispute. This creates a circular problem. To prove that the space has remained untouched, investigators may need to touch it. To preserve its untouched state, they must accept incomplete proof. The door protects its own uncertainty. You read a sentence stating that the chamber remains unopened. Another page claims previous access occurred. A third carefully distinguishes between the vault, the antechamber, and the inner enclosure. The apparent contradiction begins to soften. Perhaps several statements are true at once. Outer barriers may have opened. Intermediate spaces may have been entered. The final enclosure may have remained closed. It's also possible that authorized access occurred in some earlier period without surviving documentation. Absence from a register does not prove absence from history, especially where records have been damaged, lost, or privately kept. Scholars remain divided. Some historians emphasize the repeated references to controlled access and reject claims of absolute isolation. Others argue that the sacred core of the chamber may still have remained undisturbed across generations. The debate survives because the terms are unstable. What counts as the chamber? What counts as open air? Who possesses authority to define either act? These questions appear technical, yet they determine the entire story. Night settles around the archive. The ceiling fan continues turning, pushing warm air across tied bundles of paper. Ink fades slowly within the files, while insects tap against the window. The records do not destroy the mystery. They refine it. They reveal that the sealed doorway is not protected by silence alone. It is protected by competing memories, incomplete language, and the narrow distance between entering a passage and crossing its final threshold. The papers close. The uncertainty remains open. Water moves beneath old cities with a patience that human walls rarely match. You stand in a dim corridor where the stone feels cool beneath your palm. The air carries a faint mineral scent, mixed with damp wood and old dust. Somewhere beyond the visible passage, a drop falls at regular intervals. The sound is small. Its meaning is not. Thiruvananthapuram receives heavy seasonal rain, and every ancient building in the region must negotiate with water. Roofs direct it outward. Courtyards collect it. Channels carry it away before moisture weakens wood, plaster, and foundations. Underground rooms face greater danger. Water can enter through cracks too narrow for a finger. It can rise slowly through porous stone, gather beneath floors, or travel along forgotten construction joints. A chamber may remain dry for years, then change during one unusually severe monsoon. Engineers therefore consider several practical explanations for caution near the sealed vault. The first is flooding. A chamber below ground level may connect indirectly with saturated soil, old drainage lines, or natural water movement. Opening a barrier can disturb pressure, redirect moisture, or allow humid air to enter a previously stable space. Nothing dramatic needs to happen immediately. Damage can begin quietly. Salt carried by groundwater may crystallize inside stone. Timber can swell. Iron fittings can corrode faster once fresh air reaches damp surfaces. Organic materials may begin decaying after centuries of relative stability. A closed room creates its own climate. Temperature changes slowly. Air movement remains limited. Moisture may settle into a balance that appears unsafe but remains surprisingly stable. Breaking that balance can expose hidden materials to rapid change. Researchers at Stanford and the University of Cambridge have examined how historic structures react when sealed environments are opened. Their work shows that conservation begins before anyone crosses the threshold. The air itself becomes evidence. You imagine an engineer kneeling near the base of the doorway. He studies discoloration along the stone, looking for tide marks, mineral deposits, and softened mortar. A thin white line may suggest old moisture. A dark stain may suggest something else. No single mark provides certainty. The second concern involves underground passages. Old temples often contain drains, storage corridors, foundation spaces, and service routes built across different periods. Later renovations may block some passages while preserving others behind walls. A forgotten corridor can become a channel for water. Local traditions sometimes speak of tunnels leading from the temple toward palaces, wells, or even the distant sea. The grandest versions imagine secret royal escape routes extending beneath the city. No reliable survey confirms such a vast network. The legend survives because smaller hidden spaces are entirely plausible. A blocked drain can resemble a tunnel entrance. A maintenance passage can grow into an escape route through retelling. A narrow ventilation shaft may become a mysterious connection to the coast. Architecture encourages exaggeration. You hear water moving behind masonry, though the source remains invisible. It could be rain passing through a channel. It could be groundwater pressing against stone. It could be a leaking modern pipe hidden within older construction. The wall offers no explanation. A fringe story claims that opening the chamber could release seawater through an ancient underground passage. In this version, the vault stands beside a concealed channel connected directly to the Arabian Sea. The tale is physically doubtful. The temple does not sit upon a simple open tunnel waiting to flood the city. Yet the rumour transforms ordinary groundwater anxiety into something memorable and terrifying. A closed door becomes a dam, the sea waits beyond it. Such stories reveal how people translate engineering uncertainty into narrative. Pressure, moisture, and hidden channels are difficult to imagine. A sleeping ocean behind stone is easier. The third concern is structural weakness. Underground chambers carry the weight of walls, halls, towers, and centuries of repair. Their ceilings may depend upon arches, beams, and stone joints that appear strong until disturbed. A doorway contributes to that balance. Forcing it can send vibration through surrounding the masonry. Removing a frame may release pressure held for decades. Even drilling near old stone can widen cracks too small to notice. The danger may not lie inside. It may lie above. You picture worship continuing in the halls while engineers study the foundation below. Bells sound through pillars carrying immense loads. Pilgrims cross floors supported by the stonework whose full arrangement remains uncertain. No one wants an experiment beneath them. Modern structural examination offers several methods. Ground-penetrating radar can suggest hidden voids. Thermal imaging may reveal moisture differences. Small cameras can sometimes enter through existing gaps without damaging the barrier. Each method has limits. Dense stone can distort signals. Metal fittings can interfere with readings. Irregular foundations produce confusing patterns. A scan may identify an empty space without revealing its condition or purpose. Technology sees shapes. It does not see meaning. Research published in journals such as Nature and Science has shown how non-invasive surveys can transform the study of historic buildings. These methods allow specialists to investigate hidden spaces while reducing physical disturbance. They do not eliminate uncertainty. A dark shape beneath a floor might be a chamber, a drain, loose soil, or a repair trench. Interpretation depends upon comparison, experience, and careful restraint. Scholars continue debating how much investigation is justified when a structure remains active and sacred. Some argue that modern scanning should proceed because it does not require physical entry. Others warn that even remote examination can violate religious expectations. The disagreement is subtle. One side treats knowledge as harmless unless the structure is touched. The other believes that restricted space includes the right to remain unseen and unmeasured. Both understand protection differently. Water complicates every position. If the chamber contains moisture, delay could allow damage to continue unnoticed. Valuable objects, manuscripts, fabric, or wooden supports may deteriorate while arguments remain unresolved. Opening the space could also accelerate that damage. The safest action depends upon conditions no one can confirm without investigation. The problem folds back upon itself. Like a corridor returning to its own entrances, you feel cool air near the lower stones. Perhaps it comes from a narrow gap. Perhaps your mind invents movement because the chamber is famous for silence. Underground spaces encourage the senses to become uncertain. A drop falls again, then another. Engineers would want measurements. They would record humidity, temperature, wall movement, and groundwater level across several seasons. They might place sensors nearby without crossing the protected boundary. Time would become part of the survey. One monsoon is not enough. Patterns matter more than moments. A chamber that remains stable across several wet seasons presents a different risk from one showing gradual movement or rising moisture. Patience becomes a scientific method. Temple authorities may also possess practical knowledge that no instrument immediately provides. A keeper remembers which corridor smells damp during heavy rain. A priest notices when a floor sounds hollow beneath a particular step. Experience gathers data without calling it data. The most responsible investigation would combine both worlds. Engineers provide measurement. Historians reconstruct building phases. Custodians contribute inherited knowledge about repairs, rituals, and seasonal changes. Even then, no decision becomes simple. Water has no respect for legal categories. It does not care whether a room is sacred, historical, or disputed. It follows pressure, gravity, and opportunity. It enters where stone opens and remains where air cannot carry it away. The sealed vault may be perfectly dry. It may contain only dust. It may also rest beside old channels that continue working beneath the city, carrying rain through darkness towards some forgotten outlet. The uncertainty is enough to slow every hand. You step away from the cool wall while the hidden dripping continues. Above, rain begins tapping against the temple roofs, soft and steady. Beneath the floor, unseen water. Water answers. The courtroom carries none of the temple's incense. Yet the same earth gathers around the sealed chamber. You sit beneath high ceilings while advocates arrange papers across polished wooden tables. Judges enter, clerks rise, and every conversation settles into formal stillness. Outside, traffic moves through the city, but inside, language becomes measured. The question appears simple. Who holds authority over the temple? Its answer reaches across religion, property, history, custom, constitutional law. The shrine remains a living place of worship, yet it also contains wealth, architecture, and records of national importance. The former royal family claims a continuing duty of guardianship. Devotees claim spiritual belonging. The state claims responsibility for public order and lawful administration. Each claim carries weight. Indian courts have long recognized that religious institutions can possess property and maintain customs. They have also ruled that management may face oversight when questions of misappropriation, public trust, or administrative failure arise. Faith does not erase accountability. Accountability does not erase faith. You watch an advocate rise and explain that the temple cannot be treated as an ordinary museum. Its ceremonies continue daily, shaped by rules older than modern legislation. Decisions about access may affect worshippers who believe the chamber's closure forms part of sacred order. Another advocate answers with financial records. He argues that extraordinary assets require extraordinary safeguards. Gold, jewels, ritual objects, and ancient coins cannot remain protected only through custom. Modern security, accurate inventories, and clear responsibility are necessary. The judges listen without visible reaction. Their task is not to decide whether a sacred warning is spiritually true. A courtroom cannot measure divine displeasure, nor can it test ritual danger through experiment. The law must instead examine rights, duties, historical practice, and public interest. This produces an unusual form of restraint. The court can issue orders affecting locks, guards, committees, and inventories. It cannot command belief. Even the strongest legal ruling cannot make a devotee feel that a forbidden threshold has become harmless. Authority reaches the door. It may not cross the mind. Records confirm that Indian law distinguishes between essential religious practices and the secular administration surrounding religious institutions. Worship, ritual, property management, employment, and financial control may receive different legal treatment. The distinction sounds tidy in textbooks. Inside a temple, it becomes difficult. A key may appear administrative, yet tradition determines who may hold it. A treasury may appear financial, yet its objects may remain sacred. A doorway may seem architectural, yet crossing it could carry ritual meaning. Nothing stays in one category. Researchers at Harvard and Yale have examined similar disputes involving religious freedom and public regulation. Their work shows that courts often struggle when sacred practice and institutional management overlap completely. A judge prefers a clear boundary. Living tradition rarely provides one. The former royal family's position adds another layer. Their connection to the temple is not presented merely as ownership. It is described as service inherited through generations, shaped by the old dedication of Travancore to the divine ruler. Their supporters view this bond as constitutional memory. Critics view it more cautiously. They ask whether hereditary guardianship should survive political transformation without stronger public supervision. A royal family may preserve tradition faithfully, but modern law cannot rely solely upon ancestry as proof of administrative competence. Devotion is not an audit. An audit is not devotion. Temple priests hold a different form of authority. Their knowledge comes through ritual training, lineage, and daily practice. They understand which spaces require purification, which objects belong to particular ceremonies, and which actions would cause religious distress. Yet priests do not necessarily control every legal decision. Their authority may be sacred but limited in administration. Trustees, committees, security officers, accountants, and courts occupy neighbouring fields of responsibility. The system resembles a crowded courtyard. Everyone has a place. No one stands entirely alone. One peculiar rumour claims that certain legal discussions were delayed because astrologers warned of unfavourable consequences. Reliable court procedure does not rest upon such predictions. Yet consultations with ritual specialists have sometimes influenced public conversation around the chamber. The rumour survives for a reason. It suggests that even modern institutions hesitate when ancient fear enters the room. Officials who dismiss a warning may still worry about public reaction if anything goes wrong. A cracked wall becomes an omen. A storm becomes punishment. An ordinary illness becomes evidence that restraint was wiser. Law must govern people who interpret events differently. You hear a judge ask whether the chamber's condition can be assessed without violating its sanctity. Could instruments examine nearby masonry? Could security improve without opening the inner barrier? Could religious authorities define acceptable forms of observation? The questions seek compromise. Compromise, however, assumes that each side can surrender something. A sacred prohibition may not contain a negotiable percentage. For some devotees, partial entry remains entry. The line is absolute. For administrators, Absolute refusal creates equal difficulty. They must accept responsibility for objects they cannot inspect, hazards they cannot measure, and records they cannot complete. Responsibility without access feels impossible. Access without consent feels dangerous. Scholars at Oxford continue debating whether courts should defer strongly to religious custodians in matters involving restricted sacred spaces. Some argue that intervention should remain minimal unless clear evidence of harm exists. Others believe that culturally significant wealth demands independent supervision, especially when ownership and management remain contested. Both positions claim caution. One fears state intrusion. The other fears institutional secrecy. You notice how the sealed chamber changes the language of everyone involved. Advocates rarely speak only about doors and objects. They speak about dignity, heritage, trust, fear, sovereignty, and constitutional balance. The chamber becomes larger than its dimensions. Public opinion presses from outside. Some citizens demand complete disclosure, believing hidden wealth belongs morally to the nation. Others insist that offerings remain the property of the deity and cannot become public assets. A third group prefers silence. They worry that opening the chamber would reduce a sacred mystery to television spectacle, market estimates, an endless political argument. Their concern is not irrational. Modern attention consumes slowly. Once images appear, every object becomes content. Experts compete with rumour, sacred ornaments become price tags, court hearings become entertainment. The chamber would enter a different kind of exposure. The judges must therefore protect more than property. They must protect religious peace, institutional legitimacy, and public confidence. A careless order could damage all three. Legal authority works best when obeyed willingly. A forced decision may settle procedure while deepening resentment. The court seeks arrangements that distribute responsibility among temple representatives, administrators, security experts, and independent observers. Shared authority reduces risk. It also multiplies disagreement. You watch signatures appear beneath formal recommendations. Committees receive duties. Security measures gain approval. Inventories remain supervised. The sealed chamber continues occupying a special category. No declaration satisfies everyone. That may be the most honest result. The law is often imagined as a sword cutting through uncertainty. Here, it behaves more like a lamp carried carefully along a dark corridor. It illuminates one step, then another, without claiming to reveal the entire passage. The judges can define management. They can require protection. They can demand reports and appoint guardians. They cannot manufacture a shared understanding of the threshold. The courtroom gradually empties. Papers return to files, chairs move softly, and advocates gather their notes. The sealed chamber remains many miles away, untouched by the day's arguments. Yet every word spoken here reaches it. The priests carry duty. The royal descendants carry memory. The officials carry liability. The judges carry the burden of choosing which form of caution deserves the greatest respect. No one holds a simple key. The first estimate appears almost casually. A journalist studies the inventory, speaks with unnamed specialists, and publishes a number large enough to travel around the world. By evening, the amount has doubled in conversation. By morning, someone adds another zero. Treasure encourages arithmetic. You sit in a quiet office where photographs of coins, chains, vessels, and jewels cover a wide table. Appraisers discuss weight, purity, age, workmanship, and rarity. Their voices remain calm, although the figures rising between them do not. The calculation begins with metal. Gold can be weighed, its purity can be tested, and its market value can be estimated on any given day. This method offers a number that appears objective, clean, and reassuringly modern. It is also deeply incomplete. A ceremonial crown does not become understandable when multiplied by the price of gold. A rare coin cannot be valued like an ordinary piece of metal. A sacred image shaped by a master craftsman may carry historical importance far beyond its raw material. Melting value measures destruction. It asks what remains after identity is removed. The public estimates surrounding the temple's wealth became enormous because even the simplest calculations produced extraordinary totals. Large quantities of gold, precious stones, and historic objects create numbers that seem almost unreal. Yet every total depends upon assumptions. How much does each object weigh? What is its purity, which stones are genuine, and which require specialist testing? How should rare coins be priced when no comparable sale exists? Each answer changes the result. Records from major museums confirm that unique cultural objects cannot be valued through ordinary markets alone. Curators consider provenance, artistic quality, condition, historical association, and cultural significance. These factors resist neat calculation. An object connected to a vanished ruler may be irreplaceable. A vessel used in centuries of worship may possess meaning that no private collector can purchase honestly. Price becomes a poor language. You hear an appraiser describe a necklace as exceptionally valuable. A priest listening nearby does not disagree, but he understands the phrase differently. The appraiser means scarcity. The priest means presence. The necklace may have touched a sacred image during ceremonies witnessed by generations. Its worth lies partly in those moments, none of which can be separated and sold. The market asks who would buy it. Tradition asks who has the right to offer it. Scholars at Harvard and Oxford have examined how sacred objects move between religious, artistic, and financial categories. Their research shows that an object's identity changes depending upon who is looking. A collector sees rarity. A historian sees evidence. A worshipper sees relationship. All three may admire the same object, yet only one understands it as something that should never belong to an individual. The disagreement becomes especially sharp when newspapers describe the collection as available wealth. The phrase suggests that the treasure could solve public problems if converted into money. Schools could be built, hospitals could be funded, debts could be reduced. The argument carries moral force because suffering is immediate. While gold rests unused in darkness, a locked chamber can appear selfish when viewed beside poverty. The response is equally powerful. Devotees argue that offerings were not given to the government, the royal family, or future economic planners. They were given to the deity. Redirecting them would violate the intention of countless donors. A promise cannot be reassigned casually. You imagine a woman removing a bracelet from her wrist after a family crisis. She places it before the sacred presence with relief, grief, and gratitude mixed together. Centuries later, an economist calls it an asset. Both descriptions are accurate. Only one remembers the tears. A quirky rumour claims that the treasure's value exceeds the wealth of several modern nations combined. Such claims circulate freely because few listeners pause to ask which nations, which year, or which method of calculation. Large numbers enjoy poor supervision. They grow through repetition, especially when mystery prevents full verification. Each estimate becomes evidence for the next, even when all depend upon the same uncertain report. The total begins to float free from the objects. Some accounts speak of trillions in local currency. Others convert the amount into dollars, pounds, or imagined modern equivalents. Exchange rates change. Gold prices move, and historical valuations multiply the confusion. Precision becomes theatrical. A number with many digits looks authoritative, even when its foundation remains uncertain. The extra decimals perform confidence rather than provide it. Researchers at Yale have explored how societies assign symbolic value to treasure during periods of political tension. Their findings suggest that hidden wealth often becomes a screen for public hopes and frustrations. People see what they need. One person sees national inheritance, another sees neglected social welfare, a devotee sees sacred trust. A politician may see an opportunity to sound concerned while avoiding any practical responsibility. The treasure absorbs every argument. An open, scholarly debate asks whether culturally important sacred wealth should ever receive a public monetary estimate. Supporters argue that valuation helps determine security, insurance, conservation, and legal responsibility. Opponents warn that pricing encourages theft, speculation, and the false belief that everything can be exchanged. Both concerns are reasonable. Security officers need some understanding of risk. Conservators need budgets. Courts may require estimates when assigning responsibility. Yet every published number advertises temptation. A thief does not need theological context. He needs a headline. The temple must therefore protect objects whose public value rises whenever people discuss them. Greater attention produces stronger security, which produces greater expense and deeper secrecy. Wealth begins consuming resources simply by existing. Guards require salaries, cameras require maintenance, climate control, conservation laboratories, secure transport, and specialist examination all demand funding. Treasure is not free. Its protection creates an economy around stillness. You walk through an imagined conservation room where one gold vessel rests beneath soft light. Specialists examine a crack near its base. The repair will take weeks, perhaps months, because any intervention must preserve both structure and ceremonial meaning. The vessel cannot simply be replaced. Its history is the reason it matters. Stanford researchers studying cultural heritage have emphasized that preservation decisions often reveal social priorities. Communities choose what deserves care, which stories receive funding, and whose understanding of value dominates. The temple collection forces those choices into uncomfortable clarity. Should the finest objects enter a museum for public education? Should they remain concealed because their sacred role continues? Can replicas serve ceremonial needs while originals receive conservation? Each proposal creates new objections. A museum offers safety and scholarship but removes objects from ritual context. Continued temple storage preserves meaning but limits study and public access. A replica protects the original. It may also feel spiritually empty. No calculation resolves that tension. You look again at the imagined inventory. Beside each object, an empty space waits for estimated VU. The column appears simple, but it demands an answer to a question larger than accounting. What is devotion worth? The honest response may be nothing. The honest response may be everything. A gold coin has a market price. The prayer attached to it does not. A gemstone can be graded, but gratitude cannot. A ceremonial chain can be weighed, while centuries of reverent reliance remain weightless. The figures continue rising. The meaning refuses to enter them. Night settles over the city and financial markets close in distant countries. Gold prices pause until morning. Currency values wait for another day of movement. Inside the temple, the objects remain where they are. Their material value changes without touching them. Their sacred value does not ask permission from the market. A coin lies beneath your gaze, no larger than the tip of your thumb. Its surface carries the face of a ruler whose palace has vanished. The inscription circles his profile in letters few visitors could read. His armies are gone, his ministers forgotten, and his capital survives only through broken foundations. The coin remains. It may have crossed seas, changed hands in crowded markets, and rested inside several purses before reaching the temple. Each exchange removed it farther from the court that created it. By the time it entered sacred storage yards, its ruler meant almost nothing. Its metal meant something. Its journey meant more. Southern India stood within vast networks linking the Arabian Sea, the Persian Gulf, Eastern Africa, and ports far beyond them. Pepper, cardamom, timber, textiles, pearls, horses, metals, and luxury goods moved through these waters. The ocean was not empty space. It was a road without stores, without stones. Merchants waited for seasonal winds, learning when the air would carry ships eastward and when it would bring them home. Navigation depended upon experience, inherited knowledge, stars, currents, and careful observation of clouds. A successful voyage could produce immense profit. It could also disappear within one storm. You imagine a trading vessel approaching the coast near dusk. Its sails hang heavy with moisture. Its wooden hull groans beneath jars, cloth bundles, and sealed chests. Sailors smell land before they see it. Wet soil reaches them first, then smoke, then spices stored near the harbour. The passengers have travelled for weeks, perhaps months. Some carry letters for merchants. Others bring silver, gold, coral, glass, or horses purchased in distant ports. Every cargo contains risk. When the ship reaches safety, gratitude may take material form. A foreign coin can become an offering. A gemstone brought through several kingdoms may enter a sacred ornament. A gold chain may be commissioned from profit earned across the sea. The temple receives the ocean indirectly. Records from archaeological sites along India's western coast confirm contact with Mediterranean, Arabian, Persian, and African trading communities. Researchers from Oxford and the University of Pennsylvania have traced these connections through coins, ceramics, ship remains, and imported materials. The evidence reveals movement across astonishing distances. A fragment of pottery can connect a coastal settlement with a kiln thousands of miles away. A coin can identify a vanished dynasty. A bead can preserve the route of a merchant whose name disappeared completely. Small objects carry wide worlds. Inside a sacred treasury, these worlds meet without explanation. Coins issued by rival rulers may lie beside one another peacefully. Ornaments shaped in different artistic traditions rest within the same darkness. Political enemies become neighbours. Time is very diplomatic. A ruler once stamped his authority onto metal because he wanted subjects to recognise his power. Centuries later, the same coin becomes valuable because no one remembers his kingdom clearly. His command turns into curiosity. Numismatists study such pieces through portraits, inscriptions, weight, and metal composition. They compare minting marks and patterns of wear, building timelines from details most people barely notice. A scratch can matter. A clipped edge may reveal that someone removed a small amount of precious metal. A test mark can show where a merchant checked whether the coin was genuine. A hole suggests that the piece may once have been worn as jewellery. Money often changed identity. A foreign coin could become an ornament because its image appeared exotic or prestigious. It might be stitched onto clothing, hung from a necklace, or placed within a ceremonial decoration. Its original value became secondary. This transformation creates a scholarly debate. Some historians interpret foreign coins in temple collections as evidence of direct long-distance trade. Others warn that coins can travel for generations through gifts, inheritance, conquest, and resale. A coin found in one place does not prove its first owner travelled there. Objects move more easily than people. Researchers at Yale and Harvard have emphasized this caution when reconstructing ancient commerce. A single piece offers possibility. Large patterns across many sites provide stronger evidence. The treasury contains both. Individual objects remain mysterious, while the collection as a whole suggests centuries of contact with distant markets and courts. You turn your attention to an ornament shaped like a flower. Its petals are made from thin gold, each one worked with tiny lines. Small stones sit within raised settings, though several are missing. The design may reflect a workshop connected to a royal court. That court may no longer exist. Craftsmen often move between kingdoms, carrying techniques wherever patrons offered protection. A goldsmith trained in one region could work for a ruler elsewhere, blending styles with local taste. Art travelled inside skilled hands. A peculiar tradition tells of jewellers who deliberately left tiny imperfections in sacred ornaments because perfect beauty belonged only to the divine. The claim cannot be applied to every workshop, but similar ideas appear in many cultures. The flaw becomes humility. It may also provide a convenient explanation for a tired craftsman. Still, the smallest irregularity can reveal the human hand behind extraordinary luxury. A slightly uneven setting, a repaired clasp, or a line hidden beneath the back of an ornament reminds you that someone sat for hours shaping it. Gold does not become beauty by itself. A worker heats the metal, hammers it thin, cuts its edges, joins its parts, and polishes the finished surface. His fingers darken with soot and oil. His eyes ache beneath lamplight. He may never see the object used. Royal ornaments can also preserve political relationships. A visiting ruler might present jewels during negotiation. A marriage alliance could carry gold between courts, tribute, ransom, and diplomatic exchange might later be remembered as generous donation. Language cleansed the object's history. A gift sounds peaceful. Its origin may not have been. Some precious objects may have entered sacred custody during moments of danger. When a court faced invasion, rebellion, or succession conflict, the temple offered protection stronger than an ordinary palace store. Sacred ownership discouraged theft. Not always, of course. Human greed has rarely been famous for respecting boundaries. Yet transferring valuables into temple care could preserve them when dynasties collapsed. The royal household might disappear, while its ceremonial objects remained hidden beneath ritual protection. The treasury becomes a shelter for defeated worlds. You picture a court on its final evening. Servants fold garments into chests. Messengers arrive with conflicting news. Lamps burn late inside rooms where officials whisper about approaching soldiers. Jewels leave quietly. They travel not towards celebration, but toward concealment. A crown, a belt, or a ceremonial blade enters the temple as political order breaks outside. No register records the fear. The object survives it. Prestigious scholarship from Stanford has explored how institutions outlive the states that once supported them. Temples, monasteries, and religious foundations can preserve property, memory, and artistic traditions across political collapse. Their continuity gathers fragments. A new dynasty may honour objects donated by an older enemy. A later ruler may add gifts without knowing every earlier story. The collection becomes a meeting place for powers that never intended to share a future. Centuries remove their quarrels. You listen for the absent voices behind the metal. A merchant hopes for safe winds. A queen marks a marriage. A ruler gives thanks for victory. A refugee hides what remains of a fallen household. Their motives differ, but their objects reach the same destination. The treasury does not preserve their faces. It preserves their decisions. Each coin and ornament therefore carries two histories. One belongs to the world that made it. The other begins when someone surrendered it. That second history is often harder to recover. A coin can reveal its mint. It cannot reveal the prayer spoken above it. A jewel can reveal its workshop. It cannot reveal the hand that removed it from a wrist. The objects remain mute, yet their silence is crowded. Through them, vanished ports reopen beneath monsoon skies. Forgotten courts glow again for a moment. Ships approach the coast carrying foreign metal, unfamiliar designs, and human uncertainty. Then the vision fades. The coin rests where power, trade, and longing finally meet. Its ruler is gone. Its journey is not. Far from the monsoon coast, another sealed entrance waits beneath dry earth and patient stone. You stand before a tomb whose builders expected silence to last forever. The passage descends into darkness, while painted walls hold names, prayers, warnings, and images of a world beyond death. Archaeology often begins with the desire to enter. It also survives through knowing when to stop. The 20th century taught researchers that discovery can damage what concealment preserved. A sealed chamber maintains its own air, temperature, moisture, and delicate balance. Opening it introduces light, movement, dust, breath, and unfamiliar microorganisms. Knowledge carries consequences. When Howard Carter entered the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922, the discovery transformed modern understanding of ancient Egypt. Furniture, chariots, clothing, food, jewellery, and ritual objects survived together in extraordinary condition. The tomb offered more than gold. It preserved a royal household arranged for eternity. Yet exposure created immediate conservation problems. Organic materials began responding to changes in air and humidity. Painted surfaces required protection. Fragile objects demanded careful removal, treatment, and storage. The doorway revealed history. It also placed history in danger. Danger? Researchers at Oxford and Yale have studied how early excavations often valued discovery above preservation. Objects were removed quickly, divided among institutions, or handled before conservators understood their vulnerability. Modern archaeology has become more cautious. A chamber is no longer considered successful merely because someone enters it. Investigators now ask whether they possess the tools, funding, knowledge, and long-term responsibility required to protect everything revealed? Sometimes the honest answer is no. Your mind drifts eastward toward the vast burial complex of China's first emperor. Thousands of clay soldiers stand within excavated pits, each face shaped with the individual detail. They form only part of a much larger ceremonial landscape. The central tomb remains unopened. Historical accounts describe an underground palace with rivers of mercury, celestial images, mechanical defences, and treasures gathered from across the empire. The story sounds extravagant, but soil studies have detected unusual mercury levels around the mound. The old account may contain truth. It may also contain imperial theatre. A particularly strange tale claims that hidden crossbows were designed to fire upon anyone entering the emperor's burial chamber. No excavator has confirmed such a mechanism. The rumour survives because ancient rulers understood the usefulness of frightening future thieves. Dead emperors employed excellent publicity. The unopened mound presents a practical challenge. Archaeologists fear that exposure could destroy painted surfaces, lacquer, textiles, wood, and other materials before conservation systems are ready. The clay soldiers provide a warning. When some figures were first excavated, bright pigments began fading rapidly after contact with air. Their famous earth-coloured appearance hides the fact that many once carried vivid painted surfaces. Colour vanished within hours. That loss changed archaeological policy. Chinese researchers, working with international conservation specialists, have developed methods to stabilize fragile materials. Still, the central chamber remains beyond direct excavation because curiosity does not yet outweigh the danger. Patience becomes protection. Prestigious studies from Stanford and the University of Cambridge have emphasized that future technology may answer questions with less damage. Improved scanning, chemical analysis, and environmental control could reveal details unavailable today. An unopened chamber preserves future choices. An open chamber removes them. This principle feels uncomfortable because archaeology is often presented as heroic entry. Popular stories celebrate the first person to break a seal, lift a stone, or shine light into darkness. Restraint rarely receive applause. No crowd gathers to watch a door remain closed. Yet some of the most responsible decisions in modern heritage work involve refusing immediate access. A site may be documented, stabilized, and deliberately left untouched for another generation. The unknown survives as evidence. You enter a different kind of restricted space in France, where prehistoric paintings cover the walls of Lascaux Cave. The animals move across stone in red, black, and ochre, created by people living more than 17,000 years ago. Visitors once entered freely. Their breath changed the cave. Carbon dioxide, heat, moisture, and introduced microorganisms disturbed the environment. Fungal growth and other damage threatened paintings that had survived since the Ice Age. Authorities closed the original cave to ordinary visitors. Replicas now carry the burden of public wonder. The decision disappointed many people, but it protected something irreplaceable. Seeing an exact copy is not the same as standing before the ancient wall. Still, human presence had become part of the danger. Access can become destruction. This creates an open, scholarly debate. Some researchers argue that important heritage must remain accessible because public experience creates support for preservation. Others believe strict closure is justified whenever visitation threatens survival. Both positions defend the past. One protects connection. The other protects material. Museums face similar conflicts with sacred and funerary objects, human remains, burial goods, and restricted ceremonial items may hold scientific importance while remaining spiritually sensitive to descendant communities. A laboratory asks what can be learned. A community asks who granted permission. Researchers at Harvard and the University of Chicago have examined how archaeology once treated burial sites as sources of information, rather than places of continuing human meaning. Modern practice increasingly includes consultation, consent, and possible reburials. The change is significant. It recognizes that ancient silence does not always equal abandonment. A tomb may remain part of living identity, even when centuries separate the dead from the present. You feel the rough stone of another sealed entrance. Perhaps it belongs to a royal burial beneath a desert plateau. Perhaps it hides manuscripts within a monastery wall. Perhaps it protects ceremonial objects that only certain people may witness. The reason for closure changes. The moral pressure remains. There are chambers that researchers avoid because the structure is unstable. Others remain closed because their contents would decay immediately. Some are protected by law, religion, political agreement, or respect for the dead. A sealed space can represent wisdom. It can also conceal neglect. That distinction matters. Leaving a chamber untouched is responsible only when someone continues monitoring its condition. Silence alone does not preserve everything. Water enters, insects spread, foundations shift, and organic materials weaken without witnesses. Restraint requires care. A forgotten room is not the same as a protected room. Archaeologists therefore examine what surrounds the threshold. They study soil movement, air quality, temperature, cracks, and historical records. They ask whether the chamber remains stable without demanding immediate entry. The boundary becomes an instrument. It tells researchers how earlier builders controlled access, security, and sacred meaning. The doorway itself becomes part of the evidence, not merely an obstacle hiding more attractive objects. This changes your perspective. A closed entrance is not an empty pause between discovery and knowledge. It is a historical decision preserved in wood, stone, metal, and custom. Someone wanted separation. Their reason may remain unclear. Perhaps they feared theft. Perhaps they protected the dead. Perhaps the chamber held substances, ceremonies, or objects considered dangerous outside controlled conditions. Possibility should not become certainty. That is the discipline. Scholars working at major American universities increasingly warn against allowing mystery to outrun evidence. They acknowledge legends without treating them as measurements. They examine stories as records of belief rather than simple descriptions of fact. A curse can become historically important without being physically real. A warning can preserve a chamber even when its explanation changes. You listen beside the threshold while the surrounding building settles softly. No hidden mechanism moves. No ancient guardian appears. Only time remains active. Every year adds pressure to the decision. Materials age. Technology improves. Public curiosity grows, while inherited restrictions become harder to explain. Still, the doorway waits. Tutankhamun's tomb teaches the cost of exposure. The first emperor's mound teaches the value of preparation. Lascaux teaches that human wonder can harm what it loves. Together, they offer a quieter lesson. Not every mystery requires immediate surrender. Sometimes the most careful archaeologist is the one who lowers the lamp, records the threshold, and leaves the darkness undisturbed. Ownership becomes uncertain when the thing being claimed cannot be seen. You stand beside the sealed threshold while several invisible borders gather around it. One belongs to law, another belongs to worship, a third belongs to memory, while a fourth belongs to the people who believe the chamber forms part of their inheritance. No border appears on the stone. The question begins with property. Gold, jewels, coins, vessels, and ceremonial objects can be assigned to an owner through records and legal tradition. Yet the darkness surrounding them seems harder to possess. It contains secrecy, ritual authority, historical evidence, and the right to refuse entry. Who owns that refusal? Devotees may answer that every object belongs to the divine figure worshipped within the temple. In this understanding, the collection is not abandoned wealth awaiting human use. It remains sacred property held under guardianship. The owner does not age. Human custodians do. This arrangement allows responsibility to pass between generations without transferring ultimate possession. Priests serve rituals, administrators manage accounts, guards protect entrances, royal descendants preserve hereditary duties. None can claim private ownership. The distinction appears simple until conflict begins. A government may recognize the temple as a legal institution capable of holding property. Courts can protect that property, regulate its management, and intervene when public trust appears threatened. Yet legal recognition creates new questions. Can the state protect something without examining it? Can guardians speak for an owner understood as divine? Can worshippers claim a collective right greater than that of appointed custodians? The chamber gathers these questions without answering them. Records from Indian legal history confirm that temples have long been treated as institutions able to possess land and wealth. Their property may continue across centuries despite changes in rulers, governments, and administrative systems. Researchers at Harvard and Oxford have examined how sacred ownership survives political transformation. Their work shows that religious institutions often endure because property is attached to continuing worship rather than one temporary authority. Continuity becomes a legal force. Still, the public may feel connected to the collection through national heritage. Coins from vanished kingdoms, objects shaped by historic craftsmen, and evidence of maritime trade belong to a broader human story. A historian sees shared inheritance. A devotee sees continuing worship. A judge sees protected property. Each position begins from a different relationship with the same darkness. You imagine a museum curator requesting permission to study several objects. She promises careful handling, controlled conditions, and complete documentation. Her purpose is not profit, but knowledge. A temple representative refuses. He believes the objects should remain within sacred custody. Their historical importance does not cancel their ritual identity. Removing them for examination might transform living offerings into specimens. The curator feels loss. The custodian feels protection. Neither person considers himself selfish. This is where ownership becomes more than possession. It includes authority to define what an object is. The person who controls access can decide whether a crown becomes art, evidence, treasure, or sacred adornment. Names shape rights. Calling the collection national heritage encourages public study. Calling it temple property strengthens religious control. Calling it royal treasure revives dynastic memory. The objects remain unchanged. Their legal and emotional worlds shift around them. Scholars at Yale and the University of Chicago continue debating whether sacred heritage belongs primarily to practicing communities or to humanity more broadly. One position emphasizes cultural access and historical knowledge. Another emphasizes consent, ritual integrity, and protection from outside appropriation. The debate remains unresolved. Universal heritage sounds generous, but it can hide old patterns of seizure. Powerful institutions once removed sacred objects from communities while claiming to preserve them for everyone. Community control offers repair. It can also restrict scholarship. No principle works perfectly in every case. You hear footsteps in a palace corridor where royal descendants discuss inherited responsibility. Their family once stood close to the temple's administration, not merely through privilege, but through a public identity shaped by service. Supporters argue that this long connection provides knowledge modern committees cannot replace. Ceremonies, relationships, and unwritten obligations survive through family memory. Critics remain cautious. Hereditary duty can preserve continuity, but it can also shield power from scrutiny. Ancient service does not automatically guarantee modern transparency. Respect and supervision must somehow share the same room. A peculiar local tale claims that the chamber does not belong to any living person because it has already been claimed by the guardians beneath the earth. In this story, human beings merely stand above property controlled by older powers. No legal document recognizes such ownership. The tale still carries philosophical weight. It suggests that not every hidden thing waits for human possession. A chamber may exist beyond ordinary claims, protected precisely because no living person should call it theirs. Modern society finds this idea difficult. Maps assign every parcel, registers identify every owner, courts settle competing claims, even ancient ruins receive custodial authorities and conservation plans. An owned space feels suspicious. Yet darkness resists registration. You can record the dimensions of a room without owning its silence. You can control the key without owning the fear surrounding it. You can guard a doorway while remaining able to explain who first ordered it closed. Possession becomes temporary. The chamber outlives every claimant. Temple authorities may change, governments may reorganize, royal families may lose political standing, public opinion may reverse itself several times. Stone waits through all of it. Researchers at Stanford have studied how societies create stewardship models for resources that no single generation should exhaust. Their work often concerns landscapes, archives, and cultural heritage. Yet the principle applies here. Custodianship differs from ownership. An owner may ask what can be taken. A custodian asks what must remain. This shift softens the argument without resolving it. Worshippers can act as custodians of sacred meaning. Courts can guard lawful accountability. Historians can protect evidence. Conservators can defend material survival. Shared stewardship sounds ideal. It demands trust among people who define harm differently. A priest fears ritual violation. A conservator fears humidity. A judge fears unaccountable authority. A citizen fears that national heritage may disappear behind private decisions. Every fear deserves attention. Not every fear can control the outcome. You approach the threshold again in imagination. The doorway stands inside a building maintained by human hands, protected by public law, and sustained by living devotion. It belongs to many systems. Perhaps this is why no single authority can open it easily. To cross the threshold would require more than physical permission. It would require agreement about whose loss matters most. The answer remains unstable. If the chamber is opened for scholarship, devotion may feel wounded. If it remains closed forever, historical knowledge may vanish through decay. If its contents receive monetary valuation, sacred meaning may shrink beneath price. Every choice claims to protect something. Every choice abandons something else. The darkness therefore becomes a form of shared responsibility, even among people who never enter the temple. It asks whether curiosity creates entitlement. It asks whether reverence can justify secrecy. It also asks whether ownership should have limits. You listen as the building settles around the chamber. The stone does not recognize royal blood, judicial authority, academic reputation, or public demand. It recognizes pressure, moisture, and time. Perhaps the doorway belongs to the worshippers. Perhaps it belongs to history. Perhaps it belongs only to those who accept that guarding something does not mean possessing it. The key remains human. The darkness does not. The temple is quiet beneath the night, while a small group gathers near the restricted passage. You hear the muted movement of clothing, the careful placement of equipment, and the metallic touch of keys against one another. No crowd waits outside. No announcement has been made. Tonight, the doorway opens. The scene is only imagined, but every step must follow practical reality. The first task would not involve treasure. It would involve people, permissions, safety plans, and a precise record of everyone allowed near the entrance. Nothing could be casual. Temple representatives would stand beside court-appointed observers, conservation specialists, engineers, photographers, and security personnel, and each person would carry a separate responsibility, and none could act independently. The keys would be examined and photographed. Every lock would receive an identifying number. The condition of hinges, frames, bolts, and surrounding stone would be recorded before anyone attempted movement. Even scratches might matter, especially if later questions arose about damage or earlier access. Documentation would begin outside the chamber. Researchers at Stanford and the University of Pennsylvania have emphasized that archaeological context can be destroyed through careless handling. A doorway is part of that context. Its dust, corrosion, repairs, and worn surfaces may reveal how often it was used. The entrance would become evidence before it became an opening. You watch a conservator study the wooden barrier beneath controlled light. She notes cracks, swollen joints, insect damage, and iron fittings pressing into softened grain. An engineer examines the stone above, searching for movement that could worsen if the frame shifts. No one reaches for a crowbar. That would make excellent entertainment and terrible conservation. Instead, the team applies gentle pressure while instruments monitor surrounding masonry. If the door resists, work stops. Lubricants or tools cannot be introduced without considering how chemicals and vibration and force might affect nearby materials. The doorway must survive its own opening. Air sampling would follow. A narrow probe could measure temperature, humidity, oxygen, dust, and possible fungal activity through an existing gap. Specialists might also test for harmful gases created by stagnant conditions, decaying organic matter, or unusual mineral reactions. The chamber could be safe. It could also contain air unfit for immediate entry. Historic underground spaces sometimes accumulate carbon dioxide or suffer from reduced oxygen. Such dangers are ordinary, invisible, and more credible than any supernatural warning. A person can feel calm while losing consciousness. Engineers would therefore insist upon ventilation plans, breathing protection, and continuous monitoring. Fresh air might be introduced slowly, preventing sudden changes that could damage fragile objects. The chamber has lived within one climate. Human entry creates another. You hear the first barrier move. Wood gives a low complaint, then releases a breath of air older than anyone standing nearby. Dust turns within the beam of a lamp. No wind rushes outward, and no hidden mechanism awakens. Only particles move. The team waits. This pause would be essential. Specialists would measure the changing atmosphere and examine the visible floor for instability. Animals, insects, loose masonry, or water. A remote camera might enter first. It would travel on a cable or small platform, carrying light into the darkness without placing a person at immediate risk. The images would appear on a nearby screen, perhaps slowly and without the clarity everyone expected. Stone walls, a narrow floor, several containers. That first view might be strangely disappointing. Public imagination expects mountains of gold, towering sacred images, or a passage descending towards some impossible underground world. Reality may offer dusty chests, damaged shelves, plain vessels, and carefully stacked bundles. Ordinary answers can feel almost insulting. A quirky rumour claims that the chamber contains a golden throne large enough for a divine ruler, surrounded by jewels beyond counting. Another version imagines a hidden passage toward the sea, guarded by creatures that have never seen daylight. A camera might reveal neither. It may show only an empty antechamber and another closed barrier. The mystery could simply move farther inward. If safe entry became possible, the first people crossing the threshold would wear protective clothing and soft footwear. They would follow a marked path, avoiding contact with objects and walls. Every step would be filmed. The position of each container would be mapped. Specialists would assign numbers without moving anything. Wide images would establish the whole room, followed by close photographs of individual surfaces. Nothing would be lifted immediately. Modern conservation practice treats arrangement as information. A collapsed box can reveal how objects were stored. Dust patterns may show whether a container moved during an earlier period. Footprints, fragments, and broken seals can carry historical meanings. The chamber would become a crime scene without a crime. The most dramatic discovery might involve records rather than gold, palm leaf documents, cloth labels, metal inscriptions, or sealed lists could identify donors, ceremonies, and storage decisions. Such materials would be extremely vulnerable. A manuscript preserved in still air might crumble when touched. A folded textile could separate along every crease. Wooden containers might collapse once their contents shifted. Gold would be the easiest material to save. Everything around it would require greater care. Researchers at Yale and Oxford have shown that organic materials often provide richer historical evidence than precious metal. Fabric can reveal trade, technology, and social status. Seeds can reveal offerings and diet. Wood can establish dates and workshop methods. Treasure can distract from knowledge. The team would need weeks, perhaps months, merely to stabilize the chamber. Temporary supports might secure ceilings and shelving. Controlled lighting would reduce heat. Humidity barriers would limit sudden environmental changes. Objects would leave only when necessary. Each removal would require witnesses, measurements, packaging, photographs, and secure transport. A single vessel could demand hours of preparation. The work would be slow enough to disappoint almost everyone outside. This slowness would protect the collection. Security would tighten immediately. The location of objects, routes through the temple, and storage arrangements would remain confidential. Public reports might describe categories without revealing details useful to thieves. Transparency would meet secrecy again. Scholars openly debate how much information should be released after discoveries involving sacred and valuable materials. Some support detailed public documentation, arguing that secrecy encourages suspicion and poor accountability. Others warn that complete disclosure creates security risks and reduces holy objects to global spectacle. The disagreement would intensify with every photograph. One image of a jeweled object could travel across the world in minutes. Experts would examine it. Collectors would estimate its value. Rumors would invent origins before proper study began. The chamber would lose control of its own story. Perhaps the most unsettling result would be emptiness. The final enclosure might contain no treasure at all. It could hold ritual space, damaged containers, old repairs, or evidence that valuables were moved centuries earlier. The public might call the opening a failure. Historians would not. An empty chamber can reveal architecture, intention, and patterns of sacred restriction. Its absence of wealth might prove that the prohibition concerned meaning rather than material. Nothing could be more quietly important. You stand near the open threshold as morning approaches. The air no longer smells completely sealed. Lamps reveal plain stone where imagination once built endless splendor. The door has opened. The mystery has not disappeared. It has become smaller, more fragile, and more human. Unknown things do not remain empty for long. You stand before the sealed chamber while generations of imagination gather around its silence. No treasure is visible. No inscription explains the closure. No witness can describe the deepest space with complete certainty. The absence begins creating its own content. People fill it with gold, danger, royal secrets, sacred power, and memories that never belong to any single lifetime. The chamber becomes less like a room beneath stone and more like a vessel carrying collective expectation. Its darkness feels inhabited. A visible treasure can be measured. Coins receive dates. Vessels receive descriptions, and jewels receive classifications, once examined. Each object enters a world of catalogues, insurance, conservation, and scholarly disagreement. The unknown escapes these limits. It can contain everything. This freedom makes the sealed chamber more powerful than any collection exposed beneath electric light. An opened chest may disappoint. A closed door cannot, because imagination repairs every weakness and multiplies every possibility. The greatest treasure remains the one no one can count. You hear visitors speaking softly beyond the temple walls. Some repeat stories learned from grandparents. Others learned the mystery through newspapers, television, or conversations carried across oceans. Each person receives a slightly different chamber. For one family, the doorway proves that sacred boundaries still survive modern intrusion. For another, it represents wealth hidden from ordinary citizens. Some see royal secrecy, while others see spiritual discipline. The chamber becomes a mirror. Historians at Yale and the University of Chicago have examined how communities build identity through shared places of memory. Their research suggests that people do not need complete factual agreement to preserve a powerful tradition. They need a recognizable story. The story provides continuity when politics, cities, and family structures change. A child hears that one chamber must remain closed. Years later, that child repeats the warning with different details but the same emotional meaning. The boundary survives through narration. This is how collective memory often works. It does not preserve every date or architectural feature. It preserves the feeling that something important happened, that someone issued a warning, and that crossing the line would change the world. Accuracy and meaning separate gently. A scholar may correct the number of doors. A lawyer may clarify which spaces were inspected. An engineer may explain why old timber resists movement. The legend absorbs these corrections. It grows around them. Perhaps that is why mystery survives even when evidence becomes available. Facts do not always replace stories, they settle beside them, creating several versions of reality within the same community. One version belongs to documents. Another belongs to belief. A third belongs to fear. Fear is not always loud. It can appear as courtesy, hesitation, or a refusal to make the final decision. It can hide inside formal language about sensitivity, stability, and proper procedure. You recognize it by the pause. Someone reaches the threshold, then waits for another person to speak. Responsibility passes quietly across the corridor. No one wishes to become the name associated with disaster, even when disaster seems unlikely. Fear protects itself through uncertainty. If nothing happens after the chamber opens, the warning appears foolish. If any misfortune follows, coincidence may become proof. A storm, illness, political crisis, or structural crack could be connected to the opening by those already expecting punishment. The event would never remain ordinary. Prestigious research from Stanford has shown how people search for patterns during uncertain or frightening situations. The mind connects events because connection feels safer than randomness. A curse offers explanation. Chance offers none. This does not mean believers lack intelligence. It means the human mind prefers meaningful danger to meaningless accident. An ancient warning provides shape, responsibility, and a possible method of avoidance. Do not open the door. The instruction is comforting in its simplicity. Modern life rarely offers such clear limits. Governments change, markets move. Technology unsettles old habits, and familiar institutions weaken. The sealed chamber remains stable beneath all this movement. Its prohibition does not update itself. That permanence can feel reassuring. A strange local tale claims that the chamber listens to those who speak about opening it. According to the rumour, careless words attract dreams of serpents, water, or endless underground corridors. No reliable evidence supports the claim. Still, the story performs useful work. It encourages respectful speech in around a place where ordinary curiosity might otherwise become mockery. Even rumour can teach manners. You walk through a crowded street where merchants sell flowers, sweets, cloth, and devotional objects. People carry daily concerns involving work, illness, family, and money. The chamber remains present without being mentioned. Its mystery belongs to the city's emotional landscape. Residents may disagree about the details, yet many understand that the doorway carries weight beyond tourism or treasure. It belongs to local dignity. Outsiders often approach hidden places with impatient questions. What is inside? How much is it worth? Why not open it? These questions appear reasonable, but they can sound like demands placed upon someone else's inheritance. Curiosity is not neutral, it can carry power. Colonial archaeology often treated ancient sites as puzzles available to whoever possessed the tools to enter them. Objects moved into distant museums, while local communities lost authority over their own sacred histories. Modern scholarship has begun reconsidering that habit. Researchers at Harvard and Oxford now debate whether not knowing can sometimes represent an ethical achievement. One position argues that scholarship should pursue knowledge wherever careful methods make investigation possible. Another position insists that communities may possess the right to preserve secrecy, especially when knowledge itself carries sacred restrictions. The debate remains open. Knowledge serves humanity. Secrecy can protect humanity from its own appetite. Neither principle deserves automatic victory. You feel this tension most clearly near the threshold. The chamber may contain information capable of transforming regional history. It may preserve inscriptions, objects, or architectural evidence unavailable anywhere else. Leaving it closed could mean losing knowledge forever. Opening it could destroy the relationship that made the place meaningful. The choice is not between truth and superstition. It is between different kinds of truth, each carrying a different form of loss. Material truth asks what lies inside. Social truth asks why people need it closed. The second question may be harder. Perhaps the chamber preserves the memory of political danger. Perhaps valuables once entered the underground space during invasion, conflict, or fear of seizure. Later generations may have forgotten the event while retaining the command to avoid the room. A warning can survive its reason. The rule remains long after the emergency ends. It is also possible that the prohibition grew gradually. One keeper exercised caution, another strengthened it. A priest added ritual meaning. A later generation transformed custom into sacred certainty. No single person created the mystery. The community created it together. This shared construction does not make the chamber unreal. It makes the chamber socially alive. The doorway becomes a place where fear, reverence, memory, and identity reinforce one another. Stone alone cannot accomplish that. People must return. They must tell the story again. You listen as evening settles over the temple complex. Bells move through the warm air, followed by the scent of flowers and burning oil. Worshippers cross the courtyards without seeing the chamber beneath them. They do not need to see it. The unseen room already shapes the visible world. It influences security, law, public debate, family memory, and the language of reverence. Its closure creates movement everywhere else. Perhaps this is the deeper purpose of certain mysteries. They remind a society that not every boundary exists because it lacks courage. Some boundaries survive because crossing them would leave the community with less than it had. An answer can end a story. A mystery can hold generations together. The sealed chamber may contain gold, stone, dust, water, or emptiness. Its physical contents matter, but they do not fully explain its powers. That power lives outside the door. It lives in every warning spoken softly, every argument paused respectfully, and every child who learns that one threshold remains beyond permission. Nothing inside the chamber needs to move. The mystery moves through everyone. Night settles gently over Thiruvananthapuram, softening rooftops, courtyards, trees, and the pale outline of the temple gateway. You stand at the edge of the sacred complex while the city lowers its voice. Market stalls close beneath canvas awnings, and the scent of rain lingers upon stone. A final cluster of worshippers crosses the courtyard, carrying flowers whose colours fade beneath the lamps. The threshold remains hidden below. Nothing in the evening sky reveals what lies beneath the temple floor. No light rises through the masonry. No sound escapes from the sealed chamber. The mystery remains entirely contained, yet its presence seems to shape every shadow around you. The doorway waits without impatience. This may be its greatest difference from those who gather around it. Courts require decisions, historians seek evidence, engineers seek measurements, devotees seek continuity, while the curious seek an answer large enough to justify years of speculation. The chamber requires nothing. Its stance does not demand belief, fear, or protection. Those needs belong to the living, who have built systems of meaning around an entrance that refuses explanation. You feel the strange calm within that refusal. Modern life trains you to expect access. Locked information should be released. Hidden structures should be scanned, and sealed containers should be examined. Knowledge appears virtuous simply because ignorance feels uncomfortable. Yet not every closed space represents failure. Some boundaries survive because generations decide that crossing them would cost more than uncertainty. The cost may involve damage, conflict, disrespect, or the loss of something that cannot be rebuilt. Restraint can become a form of inheritance. Researchers at Oxford and Stanford have explored how cultural heritage depends upon decisions made across several generations. Their work shows that preservation is rarely one heroic act. It is usually a chain of modest refusals, repeated by people who will never see the final result. Someone chooses not to force a lock. Someone protects a damaged wall. Someone records a warning rather than testing it. These decisions appear passive, but they preserve choices for people who have not yet been born. A sealed chamber can remain available to a future society with better tools, deeper trust, or different values. Opening it ends that possibility. You imagine a distant century when the temple still stands beneath another evening sky. The city has changed beyond recognition, yet lamps continue burning within the sanctuary. New custodians approach the chamber with the instruments unavailable today. They may understand its structure without touching the door. They may read the interior through harmless methods, reconstructing spaces, materials, and objects while preserving every barrier. Perhaps they will answer the mystery without committing the act that earlier generations feared, or perhaps they will refuse again. The refusal may no longer arise from serpents, curses, or legal uncertainty. It may arise from a mature recognition that possession is not the highest form of knowledge. Sometimes respect means leaving distance. A curious tradition claims that certain sacred places reveal themselves only when human desire has become quiet enough. The idea cannot be tested, and it may belong entirely to poetic imagination. Still, it offers a gentle correction. People often approach mysteries with demands. They want spectacle, proof, ownership, and a conclusion. The closed doorway offers none of these things. It asks for patience instead. This request feels almost radical in an age of instant images and permanent commentary. A photograph can cross continents within seconds, stripped of context and surrounded by speculation. The chamber avoids that space. No image defines it. No catalogue reduces it. No expert possesses the final word. Scholars continue debating whether this uncertainty should be protected or overcome. Some argue that historical evidence carries a public obligation and should be studied wherever careful methods allow. Others believe the chamber's social meaning depends upon its continued closure. The disagreement may never disappear because both positions contain genuine care. One protects knowledge from loss, the other protects tradition from conquest. You do not need to choose tonight. The lamps along the corridor burn steadily, their flames bending slightly whenever warm air passes through the hall. A priest completes his duties without glancing toward the hidden passage. For him, mystery may not be the central concern. Daily worship matters more than distant speculation. Flowers must be prepared, vessels cleaned, words spoken correctly, and lamps renewed at the appointed hour. The sacred world continues through repetition. The sealed chamber occupies only one part of that world. Outsiders may treat it as the temple's greatest feature, yet the temple does not depend upon the vault for meaning. Its heart remains elsewhere. This realization changes the mystery once more. The chamber is not the source of devotion. It is surrounded by devotion, protected by it, and occasionally overshadowed by public fascinations. The treasure attracts attention. The living ritual sustains the place. A doorway can become famous while remaining secondary to those who pass nearby every day. Workers sweep the stone, families bring offerings, musicians prepare for ceremonies, guards watch entrances, while accountants manage ordinary expenses. Life continues above the silence. Records from major historical studies confirm that sacred institutions survive through routine more often than spectacle. Great buildings endure because communities repair roofs, teach practices, settle disputes, and return repeatedly. Mystery may attract visitors. Habit preserves civilization. You hear sandals crossing the courtyard, followed by the faint ringing of metal vessels. Somewhere nearby, a child asks a question and receives a whispered answer. Perhaps the question concerns the sealed chamber. Perhaps it concerns us nothing more mysterious than when the family can return home. The ordinary world remains patient around the extraordinary one. A gentle sarcasm hides within the situation. Humanity has uncovered distant galaxies, mapped ancient genomes, and placed machines upon other worlds. Yet one old doorway beneath a living temple continues resisting universal agreement. The door does not need advanced technology. It needs consent. That requirement may prove harder. The chamber stands at the meeting point of law, religion, history, engineering, and public imagination. Each field offers useful knowledge, but none possesses complete authority over the others. A final decision would require trust. Trust is more fragile than stone. Perhaps this is why the threshold still waits. The physical barrier may not be the greatest obstacle. The deeper barrier lies between people who fear different forms of harm. One fears lost evidence. One fears violated faith. One fears damaged faith. One fears that nothing remarkable waits inside. That last fear remains quietly powerful. The closed chamber supports magnificent possibilities. Opening it risks replacing them with damp walls, ordinary containers, and unanswered records. Reality might be smaller than hope, yet even emptiness would carry meaning. An empty chamber could reveal that the prohibition protected space rather than treasure. It could show that silence itself formed part of sacred architecture. The absence would become the discovery. You move toward the outer courtyard as the last lamps brighten against deepening darkness. The monsoon clouds separate briefly, revealing several faint stars above the gateway. The city breathes around you. Behind thick walls and guarded passages, the doorway remains untouched. It has survived rulers, courts, storms, rumours, and the fellow restless hunger of modern attention. It survives by doing nothing. Perhaps that is not weakness. Perhaps the chamber has already revealed its most difficult truth. Human beings do not become wiser merely by entering every room. Wisdom may also appear in the decision to stop, listen, and preserve what cannot yet be understood. The threshold asks no one to believe. It asks only that someone remain responsible, and perhaps that responsibility is the final treasure hidden beneath the stone. The night deepens, and the temple slowly withdraws into shadow. You allow the unanswered questions to loosen their hold. The gold, the doors, the records, and the warnings grow softer within your thoughts. They no longer require a decision. Rain begins far beyond the courtyard, touching distant roofs with a gentle, even rhythm. The sound moves closer, settling over stone, trees, and quiet streets. You breathe slowly. The sealed chamber rests beneath layers of earth and masonry, untouched by the passing clouds. It does not fear the smell of the night. It does not measure time as people do. Years arrive like footsteps above it. Then they fade. The doorway remains cool, silent, and patient. No hand reaches toward its lock. No voice demands that it surrender what it holds. For this moment, mystery is enough. You picture the lamps growing smaller along the corridor. Their reflections tremble on polished metal, then soften into warm points of light. The city settles around them. Somewhere, a final bell sounds. Its echo travels beneath the roof, through the pillars, and into the quiet places where no listener stands. The note fades slowly, leaving only rain and distant breath. Your thoughts can fade with it. There is nothing left to solve tonight. No treasure needs counting, and no threshold needs crossing. The chamber can remain where it has always remained, held between memory and stones. Perhaps one day, careful hands will approach it. Perhaps they will turn away. Both choices belong to another morning. For now, you leave the temple beneath the monsoon sky. The darkness feels gentle rather than empty, and the silence carries no threat. It carries rest. And perhaps beneath the sleeping city, the story is not yet complete. Good night.